Let me go ahead and move this over here. Sorry, let me over here. So the agenda for today is we're going to talk about kind of the overview of LEED version 4.0 for O&M. So that's operation maintenance for existing buildings. It's not new construction. It's not neighborhood development. It's specifically for buildings that already exist and the operations that go on within it. And then we're going to go through each different credit category. So these are the credit categories that are within the certification for the building. Again, LEED is very holistic. It looks at every aspect of a building, not only just the energy or the water it uses, but how do people get to and from it, kind of what they do on the site, what are we doing about for, indoor air quality and the like. So it basically encompasses anything that building can touch, whether people or so forth. So the learning objectives is kind of what you'll notice that every credit has an intent, the requirements and strategies for, basically to actually implement the credit and to get credit for it. You will learn you don't have to go for every credit, the prerequisites you do. And so we'll kind of look how to identify those and kind of why they're important and how they kind of influence the credit itself. And there's a whole bunch of synergies, meaning that if you go for certain credits, they may help you get other credits. So we'll talk about that. So they're not completely siloed, which is good. And talk about the LEED documentation, because the way when you certify a building, you don't have someone from USGBC-CA coming to your site and auditing it. It doesn't happen. What does happen is that you go and submit all the documentation needed for these credits, and a lot of that, is proof. Like you prove how much water you use, you prove how much energy you use, all your receipts. You have tons and tons of documentation for these projects. And we talk about kind of how there's certain credits that you have to establish things before you can even attempt to do that. And then there's performance, where you kind of talk about, you got to see how the building's performing, usually on the energy and watery side, and also on the purchasing and material side as well. And then talk about kind of how does LEED certifying a building kind of have lead to higher building performance. And it may not, to me, it seems quite obvious. If you're trying to be the most energy efficient and water efficient building you can be, you're generally going to be better off. These buildings will be better, high performing than the ones that do not. Okay, here we go. All right, so what is a green building? All right, so let's go ahead, and does anybody want to put into in the chat kind of what is a green building? Just kind of. All right. All right, so definitely if you basically passed if you basically got a green building certification, whether it's LEED or LFA or BREEAM, yeah, you've got a green building there. All right, structures that could, okay. So one of the reasons I'm kind of jumping into the why now, kind of, basically the reason why we are concentrating on on buildings themselves is that because they are a huge contributor to global warming. All right, the energy and the materials needed to build and operate and then kind of end of life of buildings is incredibly significant. So again, we see here, so they account for almost half the annual energy consumed. All right, and then CO2 emissions. So they're such a big target. We have to deal with the built environment. We have to be able to deal with the buildings we live and work in if we're going to have a chance to basically mitigate and adapt to climate change. All right, so building resources, again, 40% of energy use, 73% electricity consumption is somehow associated with buildings themselves. CO2 emissions, so generally you'll see this number 40% quite a bit globally. That'll kind of, depending on where you're from, some buildings, some cities like New York City, that could be up to 80% of their emissions, or 75% of their emissions are due to buildings. But globally 40% is that number, and that's a huge target. You have to deal with it. Almost 20% of potable water, all right, is used in buildings, all right, pretty significant. And also what we're looking at here is that there's more than just LEED AP for O&M. This is what we're concentrating on today for existing building operation maintenance, but BD plus C is new construction, ID plus C is interior decoration, remodels, homes, neighborhood development. Also, there's LEED for cities now too, so this slide's a little bit old. So there's a credit rating for every situation in the built environment. So if you haven't gotten this already, and we'll give you this information at the end of the course, but there is a candidate handbook. It mostly deals with kind of the requirements to register and the kind of things you need to be eligible for the exam. There's a couple, a few questions, but ultimately there you would need to go and do more. But I highly recommend you download that. And then a lot of times it's funny, like we had a kind of a Q&A session, and it was a trivia session for one of our kind of groups that we had for our one of our green building councils, and we said, what does LEED stand for? And to be honest with you, I always have to remind myself. And so LEED is leadership in energy and environmental design. All right, so it was established, LEED itself, by the US Green Building Council, decades ago. There's been many versions since then, 1.0, 2.0, 3.1, 3.0, 4.0, 4.1. So there's been many iterations, and each iteration kind of gets more and more, kind of gets this, basically makes the buildings have, we used to think of buildings as being less bad on the environment. Now we are starting to think about buildings as being positive on the environments, where their net impact on the environment, their surrounding areas, is in a positive fashion rather than not quite as bad as other buildings. So LEED is kind of like a nutrition label. All right, it literally dissects every part of a building, and it's basically its impact on its surrounding areas, on the atmosphere, on its people. And the greater the point score you have, the better, the higher performing the building is. All right, and it kind of shows you where the performance is. So again, like I said, this is version 4 that we're dealing with. So not 4.1, not 5.0. This is version 4.0. All right. So kind of like I was talking before, like as these iterations kind of get, kind of closer and closer, the older ones again had platinum, which is the highest level you can get, where basically had the least amount of impact that buildings could have on the environment. Then the next iteration, maybe platinum, was kind of net zero impact, and then maybe this is version 4.0 where platinum had a positive impact. And then now they're really trying to get LEED, where basically every building, whether it's just the very basic version of certification, silver and gold, will have a positive impact in some way or fashion on the environment and its surrounding areas. So like we said, it's very flexible. So we have, again, new construction, core and shell, retail, existing buildings, healthcare, schools. There's a certification for any building that you have, because all buildings are not the same. The realities of operating a hospital versus a warehouse are two very different things. Data centers now are incredibly energy intensive, also water intensive. It may not be obvious, but they are. So so they basically, the rating systems adapt to the actual type of building that you have. All right. And again, these are the 21 adaptations, so that's pretty significant. All right. It's not a one size fits all kind of thing. So existing buildings actually have some adaptations. So we have if you're a school, there a lot of the credits have separate things. All the credit categories, they have similar expectations and similar ways to meet them, but they have some adaptations for the realities of schools and retail and data centers and warehouse distribution centers. So these are the different adaptations for existing buildings. So again, they have different realities and how they operate and limitations and so forth. And this is the reference guide. Okay, so I'm going to show you a copy of, kind of the digital guide. But when I first got my LEED certification AP, it's a bit of a doorstop. All right, that's huge. There's so much in here. So again, this is kind of what it looks like. You can get these at, I would imagine local libraries have copies of these reference guides, or it's going to be pretty helpful in your studying for this exam. If you have a friend or somewhere at work that kind of has a copy, kind of get to know them. Unfortunately, they do cost money if you can afford it, or they usually have a bundle program where they kind of bundle the test with the reference guide and the exam all together for the GBCI. So that's something you may want to think about. All right. So this is the scorecard. All right. So again, you can see that there's many credit categories and the credits within them. All right. That basically that you can go for. All right. So we're going to talk more about this, but prerequisites are ones that you have to meet. And then the credit categories are the ones that you can go for. And again, there's some credit categories that are heavily weighted, like energy performance, transportation, local and alternate transportation, that sort of thing, are heavily weighted. So the ones that kind of are heavily weighted, the ones that kind of really have the most impact, But there's, but those LEED Platinum buildings that you're seeing, they pretty much are getting all these credits. All right. And there's a grand total of 100. There are 110 possible points, but it's not really possible to get over 110 or 110 on the actual certification for various reasons. And again, if you're certified, so you get 49 points, up to 49 points, you're certified, which is the lowest level. Silver is between 50 and 59 points. Gold is 60 and 79 to 79 points, and platinum is 80 to plus. So in order to be a platinum building, you're really doing that purposefully. It's really, really hard to get platinum just by mistake. So that's a really kind of high performing building there. So the goal for LEED, and always has been, and LEED v4 is no different, is to reduce the contribution of global climate change. Again, we're talking about CO2 emissions, we're talking about carbon, basically enhancing human health. Again, we spend 90% of our lives in buildings, so it's really important that they have health aspects to them. Protect and restore water resources, all right, to enhance and protect our biodiversity and ecosystems. The built environment really can wreak havoc on those two. Promote sustainable and regenerative material cycles. We're talking about life cycle analysis. We're talking about repurposing stuff. Building a green economy. Again, if everyone decided to make their buildings green, you're going to need an economy that supports that. And that's kind of what's happening now with the Inflation Reduction Act and all these different, purposely legislated, things happening down, at the local level, the state level, and the federal level to really make our built environment and everything in general just kind of more sustainable. And then enhance the community quality of life. Again, we want our buildings to be someplace where people can go to be healthy, to be active, and have a positive impact on everyone. So and Claudia, thank you for the answers. We'll definitely get those in just a split second. So GBCI, all right, is a sister organization to the USGBC, which is the United States Green Building Council. They basically function side by side, and the GBCI is, so if you want to become an accredited professional, get a credential, and if you also want to certify your buildings, which obviously this rating system does, you're going to go and submit everything through the GBCI. So they're the ones that deal with building certifications and professional accreditation. So when you go and sign up for the LEED AP, you're going to be signing that up through the GBCI. All right. LEED Online is probably, I don't know if anybody's had a chance to have access to LEED Online. So if you've been on a project and you were involved in documentation, you probably have. So I'm going to show you some examples of that in a second. But so this is something that you actually can sign up and get a free account. You don't have to be a LEED AP to have this. So you can go and, I would highly recommend you kind of creating an account, and just kind of see what resources that are available there for you. The certification process, again, it's for commercial buildings, is this kind of what we're talking about, is that one, you register your project, all right? You pay a fee based on square footage. There is a minimum fee you have, but ultimately that's what it's based on. You go and apply, you go ahead and submit your application. All right, then the GBCI will review it. And almost always every project, when you submit an application for it, they will always have some feedback. I've never been on a project where they just basically said, awesome, great job, everything's perfect, here you go. This doesn't happen. So they will review it, and then you have a chance to basically kind of respond to their comments, and whether it's providing more documentation or kind of being a little more clear on what they're asking for, and then they certify you. All right. So for the most part, if you go ahead and are able to answer all their questions and kind of provide the additional documentation they'll need, they will certify the project. All right, so these are the certification levels. Again, this is something that you should know, and will most likely be the easy points in the test. Is the certification levels. Again, 40 to 49 is your basic certification level. I've never been in a project that wasn't a minimum of silver. Gold is, again, quite a high performing building, and then platinum's 80 plus. So definitely should know those tiers. Each project must meet as minimum program requirements. All right, it must be on existing permanent location or existing land. So meaning that it can't be like on wheels and you can move it around and stuff like that. And this is not going to work. It must use reasonable site boundaries. And what that basically means is that you can't basically eliminate or not, consider a portion of your building that may not be helpful to the certification. You can exclude certain parts, but there's exceptions, and you have to meet those rules. and it must comply with project size requirements. Credit categories. All right, so certification, we talked about that. So I guess I'm going to pause right here because it's a good place to pause and take Claudia's question and also get a drink of water. Okay, so there's a score and rating system taking into consideration the building's location in terms of weather and extreme elements like humidity. For example, how does rainwater management credit impact buildings that don't have a lot of annual rain? Okay, that's a great question. So for rainwater management, a lot of times what they do is you need to be able to handle a 95 percentile event for your area. All right. So here in San Diego, that's gonna be very different than someplace like Wisconsin. So it is adaptable to there. Also for energy consumption, a lot of that times is that when you're getting your score through your Energy Star Portfolio Manager score, and that definitely takes weather normalized data and does that. So yes, it absolutely is adaptable because clearly, buildings that are in very high extreme heat situations and rain situations or cold situations will be very different from say buildings in San Diego, which I think per square foot use less energy. All right, so that great question. Thank you, Claudia. All right. Okay, so the LEED rating credit structure, and this is the same with any, doesn't matter whether it's new construction or O&M, is that you have the credit category, all right? And almost every credit category, except for location and transportation, has prerequisites, all right? And those prerequisites act like any other credit, except that you have to meet them. So the LEED, LEED O&M, I don't know the number offhand, but I think it's around 11 or 12 prerequisites. So if you can't meet one of them, if there's one of them you can't meet, you can't certify. It doesn't matter how high performing they are with energy, with water, with if you just you're just about to get platinum points. I mean, this is probably just totally, I'm exaggerating here, but you say you have potential to get 80 points, but you can't meet one prerequisite, you're not eligible for certification. So you have to meet every prerequisite, and that's the deal. The way you meet each credit is basically you can choose options or cases that basically best meet your needs or what you can do, and then you have to meet the requirements. So there's several different pathways you can meet the requirements of the credit. So, all right, let me see here. Will we also look into regional priority credits? Yep, we'll talk about that. All right. All right. So, and again, so the structure is exactly the same, and I'll kind of show you what that looks like in a second. All right. So each credit has establishment and a piece and a performance piece. Sometimes there is no establishment. You just have to establishments like you have to establish a policy or something before you can go and basically find the performance of that credit. So again, this is kind of how another kind of breakdown is that you establish usually policies and so forth, again, set processes and procedures. Then you go ahead and you track your performance, whether it's energy performance, water performance, purchasing, waste and recycling, waste diversion and so forth. Then you document all this. You submit your policies, you submit your performance data, you put that in LEED Online, and then you send that for review, and then you clarify that, and then you celebrate once you certify. So that's the basic kind of pathway to certification. So one thing that you need to be aware of is that all the data you submit needs to have certain performance periods. All right. So for instance, when you're submitting your energy data and your water data, well, it's energy in VM 4.0, it's just 12 months of energy data. But a lot of these performance periods you have to track your performance, like you're purchasing and other things like that for a period of 3 months. And usually there's not a performance period more maximum than 4. They all must end on the same interval, and I'll show you kind of what that means in the next slide, but they all must end within the same 30-day interval. So you can't have energy end like 6 months before you submit and then have your purchasing data kind of be right before the day you submit. They all have to kind of end right about the same time. And you can't have a gap more than 1 full week. So again, here's an example of what they're talking about. Okay, the indoor water or outdoor water use, again, they started tracking the data in November, ended on April 20th. Solid waste, ongoing waste management, again, April 30th, so we're pretty close. It's 3 months of duration. March 31st, all right, that's energy performance. All right, and then April 15th. So they all basically end within a month of each other. All right, and then that's 12 months of energy data. So that's kind of what you're looking at. And then again, if your performance data doesn't do that, they will find it. They will make sure that all your data, anything you think it basically meets that performance period requirement. So here is the scorecard, and again, I'll show you a resource where you can download all this. And again, what you're going to see here is usually when projects start is that you go and have these 3 columns, like where you say, yes, we absolutely can meet these. Well, the prerequisites you have to meet, first of all. And you'll notice that location and transportation is the only one, and innovation and regional priority are separate, are their own things. But let me see. But almost everything else has a requirement where prerequisites. And a lot of people will go, okay, we can get this rainwater management. Maybe the yellow is kind of like maybe, and then you choose the ones you simply can't do. And it's an Excel spreadsheet, so you can kind of see kind of where you're at. And oh, we can, if we get everything, we're around silver. Usually what you try to do is you try to get about 5 points beyond the level you want. So if you're going for silver, you're going to try to get in the close to the 70 range, so that if you don't get a few points, you're still in the right range and so forth. All right, how soon after the date of the performance period does the project need to submit? It's usually, if I remember right, it's 30 days. So I think it's 30, it might be 60. It might be 60 actually. So yeah, I think it is 60. So, but correct me if I'm wrong, but ultimately, usually what happens is that you end the project, and usually you have 60 days to kind of do all the documentation. So that's what I'm, good question. You're welcome, Charlotte. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and show you these different project management tools. So LEED Online is where you submit all your documentation. LEED User is kind of a third-party thing that's connected with USGBC now. It used to be its own thing, where you can it's kind of like a platform forum where you can, if you have questions about a certain credit, you can see people who submit kind of like, here's how we dealt with this particular credit, and resources. And then ARC. Again, this is something that's probably for 4.1, but it's a separate platform. So if you ever start doing V5 or V4.1, you're going to be using ARC. So I'm going to go ahead and stop this one. And here is, you should be seeing LEED Online right now. Is everyone seeing that? Okay, if not, please tell me. You should be seeing LEED Online and Jacobs. Okay, good. Jacobs and Cushman's Food Bank. All right, so this is a project we did 2016, I think 2017, the San Diego Green Building Council, we helped LEED certify this nonprofit. And so as you can see here, there's all these different credit categories. And what you can see here is that when you click on it, all right, there's a form, there's uploads. And so this is where you kind of, I'm not download the form, but ultimately you're allowed to upload things and so forth. So here's all the documentation we had to upload for this credit. So this is kind of how you do everything. Again, the form is back in the day they do things differently now. So you have to download the form. So I won't do that, but ultimately this is what LEED Online looks like. It has, it has resources, has clarifications and so forth, and uploads and so forth. So that's what it is. Now, one thing I want to show you as well is, and we can put this in the chat, and I think there was a QR code at the very beginning, which is a LEED credit library. And this is an awesome free resource from USGBC. If we could put that in the chat, that'd be great. So when you get there, it will default to, it'll look like this, but it'll default to BD plus C, all right, which is a different rating system. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click this down arrow and choose LEED O&M, existing buildings. Now notice how we have those for adaptation, schools, retail, and so forth, but we're going to go and choose just existing buildings. And it shows you all the different credit categories here, all right? And some things to note as well is that you can download the scorecard. You can look at the regional priority for these things, minimum program requirements. So a lot of this stuff is right here. So a lot of stuff I'm going to be talking about is going to be available on this resource. The first credit category we're going to look at is going to be alternate transportation. So I'm going to go ahead and open that one up. And what you're going to see here when it finally populates is kind of the requirements, establishment, the performance, the different options. So whenever we go through every credit from that point on for this course, is that we're going to be talking about kind of the requirements, the establishment, and performance. So how do you, the different options to meet that. And then they give you the basic information about kind of how you choose, how many points you have, and different options and so forth. So this is really good. Also notice that if you go to resources, so almost every credit, they have resources and tips. All right. And so a lot of times where I'll be talking about calculators where you calculate kind of the performance that you're going to have. And again, these are free. So whenever you see an altitude calculator, go ahead and download that. They're just Excel documents and really can kind of see kind of how the credit kind of you're documenting your performance. In this particular case, is altitude transportation calculator. So all this is free. So any kind of resource you can do, I would download and use it. All right. Um, and then lastly, what I want to show you is kind of difference of kind of why the reference guide is so important. So here is the reference guide. And again, here's the altitude transportation credit that we're going to be looking at. As you notice here, the requirements and establishment are exactly the same. So everything you're seeing on that LEED credit library is the same, including this table about how many points and the different options. But what you don't get is all this stuff here, like how you actually implement the transportation survey. All right, things you need to do. So you couldn't necessarily, it would be very hard for you to certify a building without having this reference manual, someone having it, because it basically tells you how you meet each requirement. It goes into the different steps. It goes into the calculations. A lot of times the calculations are done by the calculator, so you don't have to do that. But it gives you the step-by-step thing. Here's some more math. So if you really want to geek out on stuff, it usually has the calculations that are in the calculator itself. So you don't have to do this, but if you really want to know it, it's here. And then I'm going to go ahead and then talk about how we survey visitors. Again, this is more than you need to know, but ultimately the last thing I want to show you is the one thing that they don't show you again on LEED Credit Library is all the documentation requirements. So for every credit, you choose whatever option you choose, it tells you what you have to upload and prove to them. So this is where you would find that. So clearly there's a lot more in the reference guide than there is on the LEED Credit Library, but for your study requirements, it's a great place to start if you can get your hands on the reference manual. You don't need to know those equations. You don't need to know different things, but when you start studying for tests, and again, we'll talk about this at the end, when you go and want to start studying for the LEED AP exam, this class is a great first step, but it'll be unlikely that you'll pass the test without studying and looking at and using practice tests and using other kind of study materials. This is just for you to really kind of understand the structure and kind of understand kind of the LEED process and so forth, and then go from there. So yeah. All righty, cool. All right, so that's that. And again, I'll be if you have two screens and you can follow along with the credit library, can't hurt. All right. Okay. So we're gonna go and start with location and transportation as our first credit category, and it's worth a lot of points, and there's only one credit, which is like kind of essentially. And the really thing about it, since the building's already existing, you can't really do much about its location, but you can do some things about how people get to and from that building. All right. And that's really what it's about, is that it's basically reducing the emissions of people getting to and from the building. All right. 15 points. That's a lot. All right. So if you can really kind of dial this in and that's a good kind of point getter. And so if you can start establishing, hopefully you're near transit, or you basically start to support electric vehicles, bike riding, what have you. All right. So we call it LT. All right. And the main purpose of this is to discourage anything but a single occupancy vehicle. What they don't want you to do is, driving every day, 5 days a week to and from the building in a car by yourself, especially if it's not an efficient one. That's what so anything other than that. So if you're carpooling, if you're telecommuting, if you're using transit, you're bike riding, you're walking, what have you, if it's not that, it'll help your score increase. So there's a couple options. You can just do the transportation survey. And again, when you saw me scroll down that the reference manual, you saw kind of what you had to do. All right. You saw, there's some slides that kind of show you what we're looking for, but you basically have to say to everyone, how do you get to and from the building during a typical work week? All right. And sometimes people drive, like on Tuesdays, people may drive their only car just because they have to. And then on Wednesdays, they carpool. And then Friday, they telecommute, that sort of thing. So, and then you go ahead. And then the next option, which is really where all the points are, is that if you do a transportation survey, is that you next basically analyze the data and find out what the rate is of people are not using the single car occupancy. And then if you don't do that, you can choose to do a comprehensive alternative transportation program, and the reference manual has with that as well. All right, so the first thing you need to do is you've got to survey all the full-time equivalents, or all the people who work there, and then depending on how many visitors you have a day, again, that's all spelled out. It's there's a lot of different kind of situations when you might have to. So you need to consider, you definitely need to do all the full-time staff, and then if you meet the requirements to do the visitors, you have to do survey the visitors. Do you survey everyone or do you random sample? Again, it's probably a lot easier to survey all of them. And then you have to determine how it's delivered. So you can either, like with full-time equivalents, generally it's the best thing to do is kind of just send it out via email to everyone, and then have them, we do, and the project that I've done, usually we do Google Forms, where they go and, basically kind of talk about, how they got to and from. So if you can see here, these categories are spelled out in the reference manual. But again, it has to be for a full week. It can't just be for one day, all right? And then again, if you drove alone, what is your make and model? Now, in version 4.0, there is, you can get, they may consider your trip alternative if you had an EV or a hybrid. So they have a way of basically, you put in the car model, and if it meets a certain threshold of kind of emissions, you actually get credit for that as well. It's not obvious here, but that is a case as well. But ultimately, what they're trying to do here is that if you basically say you drove Toyota Corolla, so even there's some 4-cylinder cars that they actually, for version 4.0, I mean, we're talking about almost 10 years ago, there were almost no EVs available. There were hybrids, so almost every hybrid would consider it to be an alternate trip. And some really kind of good MPG 4-cylinder cars would do that as well. So again, that's what you would do. And then you would deliver the survey, whether it's online or in person. I mean, with the visitors, it's kind of how you would have to mostly do it, but it's a lot easier to do it online. You conduct a survey, all right, and then you go ahead and you can incentivize people, like say, hey, like, because basically the more people that complete the survey, the actual better points you're going to get, to be honest. We'll talk about minimum survey rates, but ultimately you can say, hey, we'll give you a gift card to Subway, or we'll give you Starbucks card. You can't give them transit passes though, so you can't really give them something that'll actually encourage them to do the right thing. You just want to encourage them to actually take the thing there. So you need to have a minimum response rate. All right. And then we're going to talk about what extrapolates results, because ultimately 5% is really not going to give you the full story of what's going on. So you really can't get a lot of points, even though if everyone here is 5%, did it alternate transport, was 100%, carpooling, whatever, you're not going to get that many points. However, if you go beyond 30%, they'll extrapolate and say, okay, we'll basically assume that, these extra people, like 30% of the people, had the same kind of driving results or driving patterns as everyone else. And so they'll give you a few more points there. So here's what I mean here. So under 30, basically, the rate is going to be based on that. If you have 40%, you're going to assume that 40% of all the FTEs, so say you have 100 employees, they're going to assume that 40% of those employees are going to basically have the same pattern as the ones that did follow the results. And again, more and more. And so if you have over 60%, then they're going to basically assume that everyone has the same driving patterns. All right. Which is good. So which means the long and short of it is, the more people that basically fill out the survey, the more points you're going to get. You use the USGBC calculator. So I think I brought that in there. Let's see here. Yeah, here we go. Can everyone see this calculator right here? Or did I just boot myself off that? We can see it. Okay, good. So this is the calculator. All right. So again, this is, you saw on the credit that there's all a bunch of math in there. You don't need to do that. What you just need to do is basically take this calculator. They give you instructions on how to use it. All right. They give you the extrapolation and so forth. Again, you fill out this information. They tell you how to do it. And then this is for the project. There was a total of 45 full-time equivalents. There's 5 days in the work week. We didn't have to do this, the visitors at that time. And again, this is kind of the carpool information, transportation mode. Again, we just filled this out as we got the data. And we found that our overall transportation rate was about 26%. That's what we found. All right. And so that's kind of what we do there. And then the summary, 26% was our rate. So this is kind of what it looks like. All right. So let me go back to, where did my clear screen go? So, it booted my, I don't know where it went. Hold on. Weird. Okay. There we go. All right. All right. Everyone can see this now? Okay, good. Okay, that's interesting. You just kind of moved it. Okay, so that's kind of, you would use a calculator just like that. And then as we saw, we had a 26, we were 26. So basically we got 6 points for that. So that's kind of how that works. So we, we created the survey as required. We distributed it online. We had a, I forget what our completion rate was. Let me go and see if I can find that. How many people responded? So I think we had 45. So I think there was, it's here somewhere, but we didn't move on. But ultimately you figure out, based on your response rate, you get more and more extrapolation on that. All right, and then if you don't want to do a survey and you don't want to extrapolate results, there's a third option, comprehensive alternative transportation program. You have to do the survey, and then you have to implement an alternate transportation program so you can educate folks on how they can get there by not using their cars. Basic support strategies, and maybe kind of giving discounts on transit passes, and then direct strategies like making bike rooms or putting EV infrastructure in there as well. Okay, and again, synergies, not a lot at this point for this particular one. So I'm gonna pause. So that's the first credit category that we've talked about. Any questions about location and transportation, anything about that I've kind of shared with you? All right. Okay, so again, no question's a bad question. Guaranteed someone else has that question too. So, and it's a great way to kind of keep us in there. Yes, Charlotte, go ahead. You can take yourself off mute if you want.
Thanks. I was furiously typing. I'm wondering if the survey has to be conducted within a certain amount of time from the prelim submission.
Yeah, so it has to be part of the performance period, and I'd have to go back at the reference manual, see what it is, but yeah, you can't just do a transportation survey like 3 years ago. That won't do. It has to be. I think it has to be within that year, that calendar year, but don't be on that. So again, you're hearing me say that a lot, just because again, here's the book, and I can't fit all this in my brain. It just doesn't work. So. I have a recipe and I go and find that information on my own. So again, that's the tough part about these tests, is that you have to jam as much information in your brain as possible.
Okay.
But yes, that's a great question. Again, every kind of thing you submit has to meet whatever they define as the performance period.
Okay.
Yeah, but I think it's the calendar year. Okay. All right, so Nicole is asking, who is the survey sent to? So you're sending it to all the FTEs, which is short for full-time equivalents. So it's all the staff or anybody who works in the building. And then if you meet a certain threshold, if you have a certain amount of threshold of visitors per day, if you cross that threshold, again, they define that threshold, then you have to survey the visitors as well. So, yep, good questions. Thank you. All right, so now we're going to move on to sustainable sites. All right, and again, buildings have a huge impact on the actual land they're on, and the whole idea is to basically kind of to preserve or kind of reestablish kind of native landscape and kind of things that are not the built environment, so not hardscape, not asphalt. Reduce the footprint of the buildings exactly, so as well. So they're just talking about strategies there. So this has a prerequisite. So you have to have a site management policy. And again, maybe what I can show you here is kind of, where would I find that policy? So I'm going to go and bring you back to, I'm going to go ahead and do this. Come on. All right. And I'm going to bring it back to the LEED credit library. And we're going to go back to the prerequisite again. I'll just do this once because all the other ones, but if you're wondering kind of like what, what is that and how, if I want to do a policy, where would I start? Well, here we're going to go back, sorry. All right, site managed policy. And you'll notice here resources and tips. So these are the things that you might need as a project manager for this. And notice here where it says site management policy. All right, you click on that, and it's literally a CAN policy that they wrote. So if you didn't know how to write a policy, you would basically download this and kind of make it your own and sign it, date it, and upload it. So if and I would recommend when you study is actually click on this because all the requirements are in the policy. So again, another good thing to do for studying. All right. Back to this. All right, so again, we'll talk about kind of what needs to be in it, and then you get some points for restoring habitat. So if you're able to kind of remove hardscape or what have you and kind of put in natural habitat, can you basically manage the rainwater so that it's not going into the storm drains or not causing flooding? Heat island reduction, again, we're especially with extreme heat nowadays, it's really important that the site itself minimizes this heat gain and has strategies for it. Again, we don't want to have light pollution to other properties or other spaces nearby. And again, if you go ahead and actually perform and actually do the things in the site policy, you have to prove that you're actually doing it to get a credit for it, and a couple other things in the site improvement plan as well. So these are the different credits but the main credits are basically restoring habitat, reducing the heat island, and rainwater management. So you can see kind of where the emphasis they have on there is. All right, so so for site management, again, there's a prerequisite, which is the policy, and then the site management plan as well. So they're linked. So the prerequisite, again, you're researching, the best management practices. You're gathering site policies and practices. You're doing what it does. It causes you to actually look at what you're actually doing, and then doing something about it. So you can say, oh, wow, well, we're already, cleaning with electrical equipment. So you would have, meet some of these things, or snow removal, what have you. Again, there's not a lot of that in San Diego, so that you wouldn't have to meet that. So again, the idea is that they encourage the use of low emissions maintenance equipment. So those kind of, those gas blowers, those are horrible for the environment. They really encourage electrifying those. How do you remove your snow and ice? We don't have a lot of that in Southern California, but everywhere else there is. So you have to understand how you do that. How do we clean our exterior of our buildings? All right, again, and outside impervious buildings, a lot of times people use lots and lots of water and maybe chemicals. All right, how do we do that? Erosion and sediment control. We're trying to, again, that's rainwater management. How are we dealing with our organic waste, so our tree trimmings and so forth? How are we dealing with invasive species, fertilizer use, irrigation management? So it requires you to understand how you're doing that, and then the policy will kind of talk about what you're going to do to make it better. All right. So again, you have to identify your goals and objectives for all this. And again, all this is kind of again, this is kind of really high level, but the reference manual will kind of go in there and kind of say, how do you do this? How do you do all that? And again, that's why it's important to have that reference manual if you're really going to go and certify a project. Again, here's some examples. All right, so we want to have irrigation maps. We want to basically, of things that you want to do. All right, so test operation of system components, install pressure sensors, divert all plant waste, from the landfill, plant material. So a lot of these things, again, this is right from the reference manual. So a lot of times they give you some good ideas that you could do. You don't necessarily have to use everything they tell you, and you may use ones that are not in there. But ultimately you have to kind of identify what you do and kind of how we can improve it. And then the site credit is basically you actually have to perform all the activities. So the policies, that's one thing, but you don't actually have to do all those policies. But if you want this point, you do. All right. And that's kind of weird, but it's the kind of the way it is. But ultimately, you have to prove that you're actually doing all the activities that you listed in that policy, and you've limited the turf area, or you've gone to all electric or all manual powered equipment, or you reduce the emissions from the management equipment. So again, this is 3 options you can do. So again, you have to document and verify activities during the performance periods. That's I think this one is 3 months. And then, again, are we going to do restore habitat? Again, you can either do that on site, which meaning you would just take any kind of hardscape or anything that's not kind of, turf or even turf, and then you just basically put in with natural landscaping. Or if that's not possible, you can basically go and finance other projects that are offsite to do that. So on-site restoration, so you have to include 20% of the total site area as need to be native or adaptive vegetation. All right, a minimum of 5,000 square feet. All right, so that's, if you can't meet that, then you would try to do option number 2. And this is what native vegetation is: indigenous species that occur in a particular region, ecosystem, or habitat. Adapted plants that reliably grow well in a given habitat or with minimal maintenance. Okay, so those are the definitions of that. Or if you can't do that, you would work with an accredited land trust or conservation group. And what you would do is that you would take your total site area and you would multiply that by 5 cents per square foot. And that's the amount that you would have to donate or contribute to that land trust that's accredited. All right, so that's where you can do that. Any questions so far? And again, this may seem like we're kind of racing through it because we kind of have to. So we have about 5 minutes. I'll give us a break, but we'll kind of start with this one. So rainwater management, again, this is a big deal. 3 points, especially now that we're having these extreme events. Can we basically deal with the stormwater so that it's not going, taking all this trash and going into storm drains and going to the ocean? Can we manage it better so that it's basically not causing flooding, not taking all this weight? Can we do that? So again, the first thing you're going to do is obtain rainfall data, and usually you get this through the NOAA site. And there's a particular government site where you put in your zip code, and you basically determine the 90th percentile. You upload you basically cut and paste the data from a CSV they give you, which is a kind of a spreadsheet, and you put it into the calculator. Again, here's another calculator that they provide for you that's for free. Also on the LEED Online Credit Library, or LEED Credit Library. And so once you determine what that 95th percentile, so it's 7 inches, 2 inches, 3 inches, whatever they determine that to be in your zip code, again, depending on San Diego, it's going to be much lower than someplace like, say, in Houston, Texas, where they get rain all the time. All right. Then you need to basically prove that the infrastructure on site, low impact development, or or capture, what have you, that we can basically either capture or treat the rainwater. All right. You have to develop an annual inspection program. Again, these are things you have to do. You have to prove that you do. All right. Because again, you can have initially a great system, but if they're clogged or broken, then no. And then you have to conduct annual percentage. So the establishment is this. You have to prove through design that you can capture it, and prove that you're actually doing annual inspection. Okay. And then you actually have to do the actual annual inspections. All right. So that's kind of the establishment and performance period of it. Again, you have to manage 25% of impervious sites. So if you may have more than that, but you have to be able to say, okay, if 25% of your site is impervious on a 95th percentile day event, can you manage that water? Can you manage that? So you work with experts. Usually you've got some sort of landscape architect and other experts in the field to kind of see what the existing conditions are. And usually you have to, if you haven't designed it from the start, you're going to have to redo it. Or maybe you're lucky. Maybe you've got some bioswales that basically send the water to, but usually not likely. So you have to assess whether you have the necessary green infrastructure or low impact development. All right. And there's many different things. So some examples are vegetated roofs, bioretention areas, so bioswales, porous paving, so pervious pavement, again, so you want that water to be able to run and get absorbed into the ground and maybe into the water table. Rain gardens, rainwater harvesting, again, is that water coming off the roof going and getting to rain barrels. Again, that counts as well. Hardscape reduction, restored natural landscape. So these are all different strategies. You don't have to have all of them. And you have to prove, and usually it's through to the design. Like what we had to do, we had to put the design specs, and you literally had to show how each different one, how much they could actually handle per hour rainfall. And then, you basically you submit that, and hopefully that meets that 95th percentile event. Okay, so Charlotte asks, how will the USGBC-CA know whether the annual inspections are occurring? So what you're going to do is that there is no LEED police, but they actually put in there in the reference manual the documentation you have to prove to do it. So whoever does that inspection, usually there's some sort of report, kind of the date and what they did, and then you submit that. There is, again, there's no, they again, like with energy, it's a lot easier to kind of prove that that's the actual stuff because you're uploading your bills, and Energy Star Portfolio Manager kind of gives you the data and stuff like that. But some of this stuff is just you submit reporting, you say that this is indeed true, we are indeed doing this. And then they take that as fact. And if they, when you submit it and when they review it, if they don't like that documentation, they may say, hey, we need more. And that's when you would go and add more. I hope that answers the question, Charlotte. Okay. Before I get started, I could like to answer any questions people have. So far the questions are coming in, which is good. Again, no question's a bad question. Again, there's lots of information that I'm going to be presenting to you, and you will be getting a copy of the slide deck that has all this in there. So that's, if anything you missed, it just kind of, I think it's just good just to kind of really understand kind of how they're trying to go about these credits, how they're trying to document them, how they're trying to, what they're trying to get the project to do is really kind of important as well. Okay, so 205. Charlotte had to go, but I understand. It's the weekend. Okay, so heat island reduction. So the the more a project has of hardscape, especially like asphalt and stuff like that, that particular site is going to have a lot of retained heat gain, just because obviously dark, especially asphalt, if you've ever been on a hot day, is just blazing hot. You're also trying to minimize ways that the building itself is going to get have heat gain. So that's usually the roof. So that's kind of what they're looking at here. So again, what are you doing on your roof to minimize that heat island effect? Again, what that means is that generally urban areas are generally hotter than non-urban areas, kind of rural areas, just because they have vegetation and trees and shade that, on any given day are going to make them that, even though you may be a mile or two apart, you're going to be cooler than if you're in a strict urban environment with lots of hardscape and a lot of asphalt. And they also look at non-roof things, and then you also could do a combination of both, and then or the parking under cover. So again, you can go for any of these options for points depending on your situation. So heat island, again, is a thermal gradient differences between developed and undeveloped areas. Okay, I use the word urban and rural, but ultimately it's the same deal. It's the same concept. If you're living in a rural environment, again, with lots of vegetation, it's going to be cooler regardless than someone that has tons of asphalt and hardscape. So again, you want to identify your parking, hardscape, and roof areas. You want to basically kind of look at them and see what is existing is already happening. Again, here are the options. All right, so what you want to do for non-roof, okay, you want to identify the strategies for at least 50% of your site's paving. Again, you want to have vegetated planters provide shade. Do you have energy generations that provide shade? So basically, solar canopies are a really good way to basically minimize the heat gain, because not only are they providing power, but they also provide shade. Architectural structures that provide shade, open grid pavement systems again, and also the reflectivity of the hardscape itself. So I was on a project where they had really kind of whitish cement, and we looked at the reflective qualities of that cement, and actually it met the requirements for that. So that's really important as well. Now for the roof, what you want to do is basically find ways that the roof is not absorbing heat. So again, one of the things is that can you have a vegetated roof? All right, so that's option number 2. So if 50% of your roof is vegetated, or 75% has roofing material with minimum SRI, which is usually it's 90, and SRI is surface reflection indicator. All right, so anybody talking? So SRI is just basically a measurement of how much sunlight gets bounced off. So usually that's with commercial buildings. If you ever looked at a warehouse, they have that white kind of like membrane, TPO is what we call it. That's a good strategy to basically, it's white, it reflects paint, and it basically minimizes heat gain. All right, so Claudia has a question. Do solar panels just have to be present, or do they have to meet the 50 area calculation? So it has to, you can't just have a solar panel. You have to meet the area ratio of that. So, and again, that's in the reference manual, so you got to do that. So, all right. So again, so we're back to option number 2. So the roof. So if you have half your roof is vegetated, green roofs, or 75 has a minimum roofing area of SRI, and also, or you have solar panels. So, well, actually, let me back up a little bit on that. So a lot of times when you're choosing the total roof, if you have any mechanical stuff on your roof, any solar panels, you subtract that from the total roof area, and then what's remaining is what you have to meet. So that's pretty good on there. So again, this is how you calculate it. This is ones that doesn't have a calculator. You kind of have to do it on your own. Again, you're adding your total area of non-roof measures, high reflectance roof, vegetative roof, and again, you divide this all. This is, you don't have to memorize the equation, but ultimately, if you kind of do the math and it meets the requirements, you get points for it. So again, they're trying to encourage green roofing. They're trying to encourage white roofing, kind of membrane TPO, putting solar panels, solar canopies, shade structures, anything that basically minimizes heat gain and directs solar gain to the roof and to the existing areas. All right, and then option number 4 is place at least 50% of the parking spaces under covers that meets the minimum SRI requirements. So again, you're not going to have like a solar, basically a parking canopy that's basically the roof is all black. That doesn't help anything. But if it has the TPO and it has reflective index, then that's really good as well. So again, you're trying to make sure that anything that's basically kind of horizontal, kind of roof-like structure is going to be reflecting that light back into the atmosphere and minimizing the heat gain of those areas. All right, light pollution reduction. Again, this is the intent here is to reduce the amount of light flooding from your project into other projects or other areas beyond your site boundary. And there's 2 ways you can meet that. One is that you have your exterior lighting has shielding so that the light only goes basically straight down, and there's pictures of it. Or if you can't prove that, or you don't have that, you can take measurements around your site boundary, and if the amount of light that's there is within a certain, and we'll talk about it, does not exceed 20% of all the lights, we'll talk about what that means. But ultimately, if you turn off the lights, you take measurements, you turn them back on, and if you're not getting 20% more of the ambient level, then you get points as well. But but you have to do that around the site boundary. Okay, so existing luminaires meet shielding requirements. So what does that mean? Again, you don't want to have lights that basically that go, allow light to go beyond 90 degrees or up into the light. Again, that's not good at all. So obviously this is this is not compliant. Again, that light goes everywhere. That's not going to have there. You want it so that the base of the light is going straight down. All right. Yeah, so that's what it is. And then also, if you have luminaires that meet those requirements, you have to make sure that the lights are at or below 2,500 lumens. All right, that's the light intensity. Again, your light bulbs, if you look at the model number, it'll tell you how many lumens it has. And if it's greater than 2,500, you have to replace those. So when you would go the credit, you would basically update the spec sheets for your luminaires, for your outdoor shade, whatever is holding the actual fixture, and also proving that your bulbs are below 2,500 below. And if you do that, you get a point. All right, so mean lumens is the average quantity of light output over the life of the lamp. All right, so or if you don't do that, or you don't want to replace all your light fixtures, you can go and you just basically you just take I forget what it's called. Essentially, it's a light meter, and you basically go every so often around your perimeter when the lights are off, and you take those measurements, and then you turn them all on, and if you're below 20%, you get the point. All right, so again, you have to a minimum 8 points around your site boundary, and you have to have a maximum of 100 meters or 100 feet between each point. So usually it's more than 8 measurements. Like we did it one time, and we had to do about 20 measurements around there. So, and what you would do is you would create a map of where you were, the 2 different measurements, and then you would upload that as evidence, and you would get a point there. And again, take eliminations when the exterior lights are on, when they're off, and then when they're on, and then that's when you make the comparison. Right, and then make sure that you're not exceeding more than 20% of when the lights were not on. All right, site improvement plan. All right, again, you're looking at the things this is basically just trying to see what you can do to improve your site. So again, you have to assemble a team, determine kind of what your existing situation is, kind of what your hardscape is, what your landscape is, what your turf area is, create a map, and then you identify specific things you could do, standards measures, and then actually implement those. So again, you first have to, a lot of times what they want you to do is kind of just understand kind of what you have and then what you can do better. And that's a lot about what LEED does. That basically you have to go and find a baseline of sorts. This is a baseline. And then you go, okay, well, where can we improve? Okay, we have tons of turf or we have tons of hardscape. Can we reduce that somehow? And then you go ahead and do that. And then you basically have to establish a 5-year implementation plan, because they don't actually expect you to do all this all at once. Again, that's pretty capital intensive, but they do want you to implement all the no and low cost measures there. And they define what those are in the reference manual. All right. And then you work with your contractors to identify the improvements, review and update the site plan every 5 years. All right. So that's kind of what you commit to. And if you do that and you document it right, you get the points. So there are some synergies to this credit to the site. If you basically have site management and rainwater management, more than likely you're going to reduce your outdoor water use. All right. So if you're basically reducing the turf areas and you're putting in, adaptive plants and, xeriscaping and so forth, more than likely you're going to improve your water reduction. Right. So that's the synergy. So these are the kind of things you want to know when you go and take the test. Is they really, obviously they really like this idea of synergies, and so this is one of those. Okay. So we're going to move on to water efficiency. Any questions about sustainable sites at this point?
I guess I don't have a question per se, but um, I don't have a lot of experience or practically no experience in this. So it seems to me that there needs to be a lot of engagement with other, I guess, niche professionals. Um, is that the case, or
Yes.
am I missing something?
No. I mean, honestly, I'm a lead AP O&M. I couldn't go to a building and go ahead and certify it without help from other, like for instance, like when you need contractors to help you kind of do the maintenance for the HVAC systems for these sites. I had to go and find the people that design the plans for the rainwater management. So you're going in, and there's a lot of people involved. The lead AP is just the one that's basically organizing and finding where that information is and getting it done and finding the right contractor. So it's definitely a team effort. Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
There's no way one person could do this. It's just not possible. You just have to know this is what needs to happen. And then this is and then kind of as you gain more experience, kind of like who are the kind of contractors, who's the kind of experts that we're going to need for each one of these credits.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Great question. Thank you. Okay, so let's go and dive into water efficiency. Again, here in Southern California, that's a big deal. We tend to be in drought more often than not. So the big strategy here is how can we basically kind of have normal operations, but reduce the amount of potable water that we're using in the building. And again, this is all about potable water reduction. All right, so if you're using gray water or using captured rainwater, these are good things. All right. So it's just how can we reduce the use of potable water in our buildings? And then there's all these credits are basically geared towards that particular goal. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and it's a chance for some interaction here. So what are things we can do in buildings to reduce the amount of potable water we use? Anybody want to take a couple cracks at that?
Well, I know one of the things that one of our agencies here in the district is doing is offering low flow devices,
Mm-hmm. Yep.
or credits for replacement of like toilet fixtures and faucets and things of that nature, as
Yep.
well as yeah, that's one of the main things that they're doing.
Yeah, so basically it's like if you have, if you can reduce the aerators, which basically that control the amount of water coming out of sinks, to be kind of low flow, kind of 0.5 gallons and so forth. You'll still be able to wash your hands, you're still able to wash the dishes, but you're not using excess amounts of water. So yeah, and also your fixtures. So do you need to have 2 gallons per flush? You don't. So those are really kind of things that they're trying to encourage. And then RA is saying metering and sub-metering, absolutely. So if you have, basically, if you don't know how much you're using, it's hard to kind of to manage that. So if you can sub-meter, it's like, hey, like we will sub-metering, kind of our bathrooms, we're sub-metering our kind of our cooling towers and stuff like that. You can really understand where the water's being used, and then you can make decisions on how to reduce it. So that's definitely a case as well. All right, good, thank you. All right, thank you. So all these things are exactly what you're going to find in these credits. All right, so there's two prerequisites. One is that you have to meet a baseline that's set. Essentially, usually it's depending on when the building was built, which is, I think it's 1995 is that year. So anything beyond at 1995 has certain requirements, and then we'll talk about that. And then if it's older, they kind of give you a little bit more kind of a leeway. And then you also have to have a meter, a building level watering meter. All right, now you'd be surprised that some people don't. So for instance, I live in San Diego, and we helped certify buildings in Balboa Park, museums mainly. And so we certified them on the older version from version 4.0, where they didn't require this. And so when we tried to go ahead and recertify them, we ran into a problem because a lot of them didn't have a water meter. They were built ages ago. I think there's only like, maybe 3 or 4 water meters total in the park. I mean, I think that's legend, but ultimately these buildings didn't have it. So we couldn't certify them. They just didn't, and they ultimately didn't want to install one just because they were very happy for the city not knowing how much water they used. So that's kind of a funny story there. And once you prove you have meet those 2 requirements, then you go out and say, okay, how much water reducing outside? Again, there's that synergy with the site management. And then indoor water use reduction, which I'll show you, it's all through a calculator. And again, I'll show you what that is. You don't, in version 4.0, you don't actually have to prove actual performance. You just kind of say, okay, here are the fixtures we have. Here's how many people use them. And then it crunches the numbers. And then, it determines whether you've reduced enough water. And then cooling tower, again, a lot of times, especially large buildings, they don't use refrigerant or standard air conditioning units as we know them to cool the building. They use chilled water to basically cool the building. It's a lot more efficient to do it that way. And one of the ways they do that is one of the pieces of equipment is something called a cooling tower. And you can, a lot of times they have to, we'll talk about it, they have to basically slow down the water, so they have to kind of get all the water out of the system so that it doesn't clog up the system. And you want to minimize that. And then here's that water metering. So are you sub-metering your systems? You get 2 points for that. So again, why is this important? Because only 3% of the Earth's water is fresh. All right, that's potable water. And then again, buildings use a whole bunch of it. So it's really important that we manage and deal with this holistically. All right. Alrighty. So again, the prerequisite is that you have to be at or below 120% or 150%. Again, this is depending on when your building was used of the current code or baseline. Again, that's defined in the reference manual, and also the calculator that I'm going to show you takes that into account. And then if you go beyond that, 10 to 30% reduction from all prerequisite levels of the 20% improvement, you get points, all right, depending on how much additional savings you have. All right, so again, calculated water use baseline equals projection codes or metered use. Again, it's a lot easier to use the calculation levels, and people actually prefer option 1. But if you choose not to do that, you do have the second option where you actually can go in, if you meter it and then you basically calculate your use off of your billing data, then you can do that. So again, if your building was built before 1995, you have to be, if you're at or below 100% of baseline, you meet the prerequisite. And if you're beyond 1995, then if you're at or below or 120% of the baseline, you've met the prerequisite. All right. And so, and that's usually because fixtures, below this they were really that, water efficient, to be honest. And if their chances are, if you're beyond 1995 and you was built a code, you at least meet the basic baseline. All right, so calculated water use. Again, I'm going to show you the calculator so you can see that. So essentially, you determine, you have to enter the amount of occupancy in there, so FTEs and guests. Gender ratio you assume is 50-50. How many days of operations in your fixture types, all right? And you enter the fixture type, the flow rates, and so forth. In manufacturer, you have to basically when you go and put this on the calculator, you have to upload all the spec sheets for every fixture you have, and then prove all the FTEs and so forth. So I'm going to go ahead and bring up that water calculator to kind of really show you what does that really mean. All right. And so here we go. Is everyone seeing this calculator? Again, they're just fancy Excel sheets. Again, they have instructions and kind of, what are flow rates and so forth, maximum installed flush rates. All right. 1.6, 6 gallons. So these, again, kind of like what, they're basing the baseline on. And then here, what we did here is that they had different zones in the building. So we had to put in different, so downstairs had different fixtures than the West Side warehouse, for instance. So we're gonna go ahead and look at downstairs. All right.
Sorry, Robert, could you
Yep.
make it a little bit bigger? It's very
Sure.
small on my screen. Thank you.
And then I'll try to, yeah, please speak up. Thank you, Sarah, for doing that. But yeah, so it's not always obvious how big things are. So again, what you're doing is we basically said, okay, we've got public lavatory. All right. Kitchen faucet. These are the faucets themselves. And then okay, here we go. Sorry. Then we have the toilet. So you're basically defining everything. So we said it was downstairs, total of, 5 employees use it, 93 visitors. So basically these are people working the front desk and the visitors. All right. Maybe upstairs is probably the better one to do that, but let me try. Sorry. This one's a little more. All right. Again, total employees, number, again, the ratio is 50-50. They define that as what they want you to do. Percentage, again, you're defining kind of what's going on, annual days of use. Again, you're going, and then you say, okay, we have conventional water closet, the actual baseline fresh rate, and the design. So again, we meet that. And then where we did kind of gain water points was that they allow for 1.0 gallons per flush. Actual in the building was 0.5. So this is where the water savings came in this particular case, was from our half gallon urinals. All right. And again, the baseline is 32,000 with gallons per year, and the design case is 28,000. So again, that's the calculation, is you're putting in your fixtures, and hopefully you're meeting the baseline, or if not more. And then we're talking about faucets here. Again, the baseline gives you a flow rate of 0.5 gallons per minute, and and what they had was 0.35 and 0.5. And again, they saved 5,000 gallons per fixture on that one. So we did that on every single area of the building. And again, summary. Let me go ahead and refresh this. Go ahead and okay. Should allow us. Okay, I disabled the macros, but ultimately, what you would have is kind of the amount of savings and so forth. So I disabled the macro, so we're not going to get that. But ultimately, I think we got maximum points on this. So there's macros in this one, so I can't do it. So. Okay. All right, that went away. Anyway, so but that you get the idea there. Any questions on that? Sorry. Where's my slides? There we go. Any questions on that calculator? So again, it's a lot easier to do that. You're just basically putting in all the fixtures you have, and you're comparing them to the baseline that they provide to you, which is fixed. And then based on the gallons that you saved, you get you get points. So again, we saw all this. You're required to do a 50-50 mixed ratio of gender, entered days of operation, flow rate, fixtures. Again, we saw all that. You have, and again, you have to upload all the fixture types you have. So you're gonna do a lot of research finding the spec sheets for all the different fixtures and flow rates that you have. All right, and you have to presume that everyone uses it. All right, and then it would kind of, again, depending on what kind of, whether they're private restrooms or they're public restrooms, you actually get different requirements. Public, you kind of have better or easier requirements because they're public. I mean, I think that's reversed. And then you do the calculator. All right, and then the place where we couldn't see the data, but ultimately, if you say, okay, we had a 30% reduction from the baseline, you get the maximum amount of points. And I think for that, what you saw there, We saved 10,000 gallons in the fixtures of the faucets, and 5,000 on that. We saved about 20,000 gallons a year. And I believe that was 30% below the baseline, and we got 5 points for that. All right. So that's kind of, you would get this number from the calculator, and then you would read this table, and it would tell you what kind of points you have. And for data centers, slightly different points available. All right, and option 2, we metered water use. All right, determine the baseline from the meter data. Again, it's a little bit harder. You have to do calculations yourself. Determine improvements where possible. Again, I think for the project I showed you that we actually realized that we weren't going to get a lot of points. So they actually, before we started tracking the data, they switched out the all the aerators and a couple toilets and fixtures so that we would do well. So we kind of knew initially how we were going to do using the calculator itself, and then they made those changes, and we kind of, that actually reap the benefits of extra points. All right, and collect data for basically 12 months. Again, if you have to basically compare it using your own meter data, and it's more difficult. All right. Okay. Option 2, metered water use. Okay. Fixture that must be separately metered. All right. 80%. All right. And then building level water metering. Again, you have to have a meter that for the building itself. All right. You must be located easily for reading and maintenance. And usually buildings have this because this is the way your water department or whoever bills you for water, basically finds out how much usage you have. All right, and then you need to share that consumption data with USGBC. So then this is it's a harder way to meet it for version 4, but actually from version 4.1 and later, this is the only way you meet it. You actually have to have your billing data for a year, and you put it into their calculator online, and they kind of tell you how you do. So you can't, it's not theoretical anymore. And then watering metering, again, you're installing sub-meter on 2 or more subsystems. So usually in most cases, you're doing it in irrigation, all right, because that's pretty, it's a lot easier to do that. On indoor plumbing fixtures and fittings, that's depending on how the building's plumbed, that may be easier than not. But basically cooling towers or domestic hot water heating, reclaimed water. So if you're able to put sub-meters on these things, then you get some points for that. All right, so outdoor water credit, again, there's a couple options. If you have essentially no irrigation required, so either it's all xeriscaping, and doesn't require any irrigation, and you can prove it, you get 2 points. Or if you don't have an irrigation meter, you do the calculated water budget. Again, it's a calculator just like the one I just showed you. Or you have an irrigation meter installed, you get 1 or 2 points on there. So option 1, all you have to do is basically show that you don't need permanent irrigation. So that's basically the plant type, and kind of, landscape. You just have to have a landscape plan. Landscape architect will probably have a plan. You show and document kind of what plants are there that prove that they don't need any irrigation. And there is no performance because they already shown it. Option 2, again, you're calculating your water use reduction. Again, if you have a 30% reduction, you get 1 point. If you do have an irrigation meter and you do 40%, you get 2 points. So they're trying to kind of catch you to do both to get the maximum points there. And then if you have an irrigation meter, establish baselines. Again, here we go. So. All right, so cooling tower water use. Again, what a cooling tower is that if you're using what we call processed water, again, you're using chilled water to cool your spaces. So they usually have these things called chillers, usually in the basement spaces. And in order to reject the heat from the building, they use a cooling tower, which takes there's a couple water loops, but ultimately there's a loop that will take the kind of the heat of the building and reject it through the cooling tower. And what happens is that, over time, solids build up in that water and can cause kind of, a lot of kind of calcification and stuff like that, which basically can harm the system. And so they have to do what they call blow down the water. So they basically just flush the whole system of the water in the system and then replace it with more potable water. So if you can minimize the amount of times they have to do that in a given time, they call it cycles. So if you have to go through 5 cycles, then you have to blow down. If you can make it to 10, you're saving a lot of water because you're doubling the amount of time before you have to blow down the water. So that's kind of the terms they're using here. Many big buildings will have, like hotels will have chillers, office buildings will have chillers, because it's just not practical to have refrigerant, basically cooling the systems. Again, efficiency is measured in the number of cycles of recirculated water before blowdown. Again, there's the words we were using. So again, you have to, what really kind of dictates how often you have to do that is how much water or how many minerals are actually in the water itself. All right, so if you have some pretty heavy water, that's really going to complicate things, because there's lots of minerals in the water. And then you basically kind of once you do that, then you're trying to see kind of what is the limiting factor. So, usually there's calcium, there's alkalinity, there's silicon, chloride, conductivity, all that sort of thing. So you're looking for these different elements, and one of them is going to be the limiting factor, meaning that you're going to reach the limit sooner than the other ones. And you need to identify that and then find ways you can kind of basically extend that and kind of treat it. So again, you can find the number of cycles. So you may actually, the default may be 5 cycles, but you do a water analysis and say, wow, the limiting factor is actually 7 cycles. So you've already increased the cycles just by doing the analysis. Okay. And they call it makeup water. Okay. That water in there is called makeup water. All right. So these are kind of key buzzwords. And then you adjust the settings for the maximum of cycles. So you can and up to 10 cycles. They don't want you to do more than 10 cycles. 10 cycles is kind of like the holy grail. It's really hard to do. But if you can basically, do the analysis and then adjust so that's beyond, you're increasing the amount of cycles, then you get some good points there. And use additional treatment or use non-potable water. All right. So again, if you can use gray water or rainwater capture or condensate, any other thing besides potable water for for these systems, for your chillers, then that's really good. So you definitely get some points for just not using potable water at all. Again, water efficiency and energy, there are some synergies there. Again, we call it the water energy nexus. So if it takes a ton of energy, even beyond the boundary of your site, to basically move water, treat water, deliver water. And then on site, if you're, taking, like, for instance, the most basic thing I can say is that if you're in a home and you're taking shorter hot showers, not only are you saving water, but you're also saving energy that you would have heated to that extra water. So again, by being more water efficient, you're actually being more energy efficient as well. So there's that synergy, and that's something that they will, basically touch on the exam for, they always have. Okay, so energy and atmosphere. I'm going to pause for a second and see if there's any questions about what I talked about for water efficiency. Again, please speak up if you have any questions. No questions, a bad question. All right, so energy and atmosphere by far has the most points of the whole that you can get. All right, so they really are trying to encourage folks to be as energy efficient as possible. And kind of it's the biggest energy efficiency is one of the best ways to get points for a project. All right, so let's go around, in the chat, or you can take yourself off mute, but what are some low-cost ways to reduce a building's operational energy? So low cost meaning like you're not spending thousands and thousands of dollars to do it. Any thoughts? All right, metering. Yeah, again, just like water, you can sub-meter your HVAC systems, you can sub-meter your lighting systems, you can sub-meter your chillers. Lighting upgrades, absolutely. All right, again, if you're still got incandescent lights, and the incandescent lights are the ones that have that burning filament. If you go from there to LEDs, the amount of energy you're saving is unreal. There's also a really great return on investment. Okay, sensoring and metering, again, excellent. So again, if you have a way to, basically make sure that, like, so if you have enough natural light, do you have light sensors that basically turn off the lights when you have enough light, or if someone's out in the room, or if you have really good sensors as far as for temperature sensors and humidity sensors that basically can control your HVAC systems efficiently good. Improve insulation. Yeah, your envelope again. If if you have good glazing, which is your windows, and you have good insulation, your HVAC systems don't have to work as hard or as much. And again, the less it works, the more energy you save. Awesome. Thank you, everybody. That's perfect. And you're going to see everything you talked about in the slides coming forward. All right, so there's a bunch of prerequisites. Again, there's energy efficiency best management practice. So a lot of this is policies and also identifying the systems that you have, and kind of there's schedules and so forth. I'll show you an example of it. But this basically kind of identifying all the different, whether it's exhaust fans, HVAC, chillers, package units, kind of going through and itemizing and understanding kind of everything you have that uses energy, and then what are the maintenance cycles, and what are the set points and all that sort of stuff, and what are the operation plans. And so there's a lot of different plans you have to basically kind of do and create. And every building should have most of these, but a lot of times you'd be surprised when they don't, and they have to create them. You also have to meet a minimum energy performance, and we'll talk about how we determine that using Energy Star Portfolio Manager. You have to have an energy meter for every building. Again, that's important, and most buildings do. And then you have to also prove that you either are not using CFCs or you plan to phase them out in an appropriate way. And then the existing credits here, again, the biggest points is for your optimizing energy performance. Again, they really want you to be as energy efficient as possible. And then the next one is using renewable energy, and then carbon offsets if you're not able to generate on site. So we'll go through all these. All right, so again, there's a lot of things you have to do for your energy efficiency best management practices. Again, this is kind of talking about kind of evaluating where you're at right now. It's kind of establishing your own kind of like baseline of sorts for policies and systems. So one thing you got to do is conduct a very basic energy audit. It's called ASHRAE Level 1. You can do that with assembled team, so you don't have to necessarily have an expert to do that, but I recommend having one person who's already done the audit. But essentially what you're doing is you're grabbing energy bills, you're walking around the site looking for kind of things we can do to make it better. Energy, maybe some lighting upgrade opportunities, HVAC opportunities, building envelope. And then here's where these like current facility requirements, operates and maintenance plans, these are things that they define what they are in the reference manual. And if you don't have it, you need to basically create it. They also have, again, on LEED Credit Library, they have templates for this. So again, if you're not really sure what it is, go and download those templates and you can really learn a lot from it. So I'm going to go and show you an example of, where is it, of this is a systems narrative. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and bring this over. It's not letting me do that. Why not? All right, we can escape. All right, there we go. Again, so you should be seeing the system narrative. This is for, again, the food bank that we had. Go ahead. So again, it's basically talking about all the base building systems. It's, and I'm not going to have you read it all, but it's ultimately you're identifying the different types of HVAC equipment you have, the heating system, ventilation, domestic hot water heating, lighting. Again, most are LEDs or they're not. So all the different types of lighting you have to identify here. Process loads, again, they've got forklifts, what kind of controls they have. They've got a web-based, again, automation and so forth, and other systems. So again, this is something that you just create the document and you upload it. And again, some people may not have these and they have to go, okay, well, what kind of lighting do we have? You'd be surprised how many people, like you have building manager who has no idea, what all different lighting they have, or how many different types of package units they have. Or package units are air conditioning units that are these boxy things you see on roofs. Those are usually package units. So again, you're basically going and finding all the information you need for these plans and schedules, and then you're uploading them. So CFR current facility requirements. Again, you're looking at kind of like what each space needs, what each space is. So there's some spaces that basically aren't occupied, so you have different requirements than those that are occupied. Building drawings, you have to assemble all your site plans, your building plans, your architectural plans, and upload those. Again, those are sometimes hard to find, and you have to find those. You have to find kind of like, what is the warehouse space need? All right. So what is function? What are the schedules? What are the cleaning schedules? What are the set points, lighting levels, humidity points, set points? All these things have to be identified. And a lot of times, especially at the very beginning, they may not know what the set points are. They thought they knew what the set points were, and they go, wow, that should be, we should heat to, 68 and cool to 78. And that's not where it is. Oh, and so by doing this research, you actually may find things that you can do just by changing set points. I mean, that's just basically keying it in. You can save a ton of energy just by, basically making sure your set points are where you want them to be. Lighting levels, again, are lighting levels too high when they don't need to be. Humidity set points, again, here are all the drawings. So by doing this research and really finding out what you know and what you have, you can just basically save energy just by doing that. And that's pretty huge. Operation and maintenance plan, again, all these things are defined in the reference manual. Again, kind of a system narrative, that's what I showed you just now. Description of building systems, and that's kind of like a systems, schedule, mechanical schedule, kind of talks about every individual system, what the model number is, kind of how old they are, where they are, building operation plan, sequence of operations, kind of like when do we turn things on, what are our set points. And this big one, preventative maintenance plan. You have to prove that you're actually getting these systems maintained as required by the manufacturer, if not more. Because a lot of times people have these amazing systems, but like a car, if you're not doing rotating the tires, you're not doing your oil changes and your tune-ups when you're supposed to, that car is not going to run as well, and it definitely won't last as long. Because folks that basically have these cars that are 20 years old, they're mint. That's because their owners took care of them. And same thing with building systems. So you can, if you have spend a lot of money on an HVAC system and you treat it like you're just gonna not going to maintain it and basically use it all the time, it's going to break down sooner than it should, and that's going to cost you money in the long run. All right, again, system narrative, we saw all that, right, in that document I showed you. All right, building automation system. So again, a lot of times you'll have software that basically in real time, if you submit it to the systems, you can see kind of where the energy is using it. And a lot of times you can see where things are going wrong. You can see that building, like, why is it, why are we cooling the building at midnight? A lot of times, like, originally the building was set up so that when people leave, generally what they do is they just basically change the set points so that it's a little bit colder, a little bit hotter, depending on the time of year, because people aren't in the building. And then when people start to come in the building, they start to kind of cool it or heat it back to where people need it. So that saves energy as well. And a lot of times that gets messed with. And if you can see, like, hey, we're actually heating and cooling the building at midnight or on the weekends, then you can change that. Again, that's just making an observation and making the change on the system. And again, you're going to be saving a lot of energy there. Process equipment, again, that's your chillers, and then supplemental heating and cooling systems. All right, building operating plan, again, this is a lot to see, but again, you can see there's a lot of things you have to see, like set points, vacant spaces, minimum outside air requirements. Again, a lot of times, especially in doctor's offices, you need to have 100% outdoor air, depending on the space type. Some need less. CO2 requirements. So again, all these things need to be identified. Sequence of operations, again, how things are turned on, when they're turned off, that sort of thing need to be examined. Preventive maintenance plans, again, this is really, really important. Again, you have to prove that you have a scheduled maintenance and that you are doing it. Again, the manufacturer recommendations, specific tasks to be completed, and you have to prove that it's actually being followed. All right. A lot of these procedures are based off ASHRAE. So again, a lot of the energy standards and on audits and energy performance are based off ASHRAE standards. So again, for energy, it's 91.1, I believe. So again, that's something that you probably want to be aware of. For indoor air quality, it's ASHRAE 62.1, I think. And then for thermal requirements, it's ASHRAE 55. So these are things that you can, if you're a LEED GA, you already knew, you already kind of knew this, because that's the things you had to know then. So ASHRAE standards set these set points. All right, so create an implementation plan for your energy audit. Again, this is your ASHRAE level 1. It's probably the most obvious one. They define kind of what it is. You have to create a report for it. Again, this is, you can use a third-party consultant or you can use in-house staff, and just as long as you know you're meeting the requirement. And then you have to kind of, create a plan on how you're actually going to do the audit. And then that's usually in the reporting. And then you conduct it, right? So again, what you usually do is you take your energy bills from your utility and you input them into Energy Star Portfolio Manager. Again, I'm going to show you what that looks like. So you really kind of find the baseline of where you're at. And that's really because, I mean, like, performance really is kind of, you can have all the best systems, but unless you actually have performance and you understand what it is, you can't do anything about it. You do the walkthrough, again, walking through all the spaces in the building. All right. Let's see here. All right. So, and then you do the walkthrough, and again, you're looking for, and we will have more slides on that as what you need in it, but ultimately you're looking for some no cost energy. Like, so for instance, could we change to LEDs? Can we basically have kind of an occupant kind of education where people turn off lights on their own? Those kind of things. And then you also have, you kind of outline kind of capital improvements. So like we can do solar panels, or we can replace our windows, or upgrade our HVAC equipment, and at least identify things that you can do to kind of improve the energy, but you don't necessarily have to do them. It's just kind of there. And we'll talk more about that later. And then you have the minimum energy performance. So I'm going to go ahead and show you Energy Star Portfolio Manager for a second. We are. I don't know why it's blocking me on this. Okay. All right. So, nope. Sorry. Too many things open. All right. So, how many people have used or know what Energy Star Portfolio Manager is? Just a show of hands or thumbs up in the chat. Has anybody used this platform before? Okay, so this is a free platform that's basically made by or designed by the energy or EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency. It's a U.S. government thing. It's totally free. You can create your own account. I've literally just for fun benchmarked my house. So essentially, what it does is it allows you put in your performance data, which are essentially your energy and water bills, and it'll track your waste and so forth, and you can set goals. So on this main page, what you see the summary is that it has a score, all right? And that score it means that this building is in the 89th percentile of all buildings of its type, all right? And the minimum score for just to meet the prerequisite is 75. So they're 14 percentage points above the baseline. So that's really good. They used to be better. They literally, when we first in 2020, they were around 100. I think something happened to their solar panels. That some of them started shutting down, and I think they also switched to all electric forklifts, so they have greater loads, so that their score went down a little bit. But essentially, and the way you here on the energy tab again, you can see kind of the baseline, and you're putting in gas as well. So you're not only putting your electric meter, but you're putting your gas meter. Again, they updated theirs pretty recently. That's pretty awesome. They have someone doing this. Well, okay, we'll go back. I don't know why it's not letting me do that. Anyway, so I think they just want to keep that proprietary. But ultimately, they're putting in all their monthly data, and it's getting graphed. It's getting graphed there. So this is Energy Star Portfolio Manager. So when you do your ASHRAE Level 1 audit, you're doing a bunch of things to help yourself out for energy and meet some of the prerequisites. One is that you get to see your building your energy year over year, which is important because you can say like, hey, last year we used this much energy, and now we've for this the base of the same conditions, the same month, we used twice as much. What's going on? All right, and if you didn't do that, you wouldn't know. So that's important. And then ultimately, this is the score you're going to use to find how many points you get for optimized energy use. So any questions on that? And if you plan on kind of doing projects like this, I would recommend basically kind of creating your own account. Again, like I said, it's free. It's what's awesome about it. You can run reports, you can set goals. It's pretty awesome. So again, it's really powerful. reporting. And one of there's a report. Oh, again, it doesn't. I get that's pretty good. They put a little restrictions on there, so you can't run reports, but I can at least get to here. So essentially, you can run reports of kind of how you're doing and on emissions and so forth. So it's pretty cool. Okay. All right, so that's that. So that's an integral tool you need for the energy performance of the building. Here we are. All right, and again, the way you're meeting the prerequisite is the same way you're meeting the actual credit. So you're just using that Energy Star score. So in our case, we were above 75%, and then we got a lot of points because we're at the time we were 100, so we got the total 20 points. But right now, when we go into the thing, we'll see kind of what they would have gotten there. Yeah, it's a great benchmarking tool, and a lot of benchmarking ordinances in cities use Energy Star Portfolio Manager, so that's pretty awesome. Excuse me. Oh, okay. Claudia makes a great point. Would it make sense to also apply for the certification when you apply for LEED? Yes. So this particular project, they applied to become an Energy Star Portfolio certified building, and also LEED. So yeah, so you might as well, because if you meet the requirements for both, might as well do it. So great question, Claudia. Thank you. All right, so we're here. Again, Energy Star. Again, the cool thing about Energy Star Portfolio Manager is that when you set up your building, you're saying you're a hospital or you're an office building or you're a school, and then also on your zip code, it weather normalizes your energy use. Because again, if you're looking at trying to compare an office building in San Diego and an office building in Maine, you got two very different kind of situations. It's we in San Diego, our weather's pretty neutral. We rarely get that cold, we rarely get that hot. So our energy consumption to cool and heat the building is much less than someone who lives in Maine, where it gets super cold in the winter times and you're using a lot of energy to heat it. So what they do, they weather normalize it so that basically you're kind of you're comparing the buildings on an even playing field. So that's why the Energy Star is very good. And again, it has any kind of building can be benchmarked. It's pretty awesome, and they make it better and better every year. All right, so if you don't have, for some reason, there's some buildings that they're not eligible for Energy Star score rating. You actually can input your data, and it will give you something called EUI, which is your energy use intensity. And then there's other ways you can benchmark yourself to other buildings. You may not be able to get a score. So again, you're gonna use national data or whatever, and which Energy Star does give you. You just create a report, and instead of giving you a score, it says it gives you a percentile in a different way. It's a number that they have a chart and again, I'll show it to you what that is. Or you can benchmark against historical data. So usually, if you don't get an Energy Star score, you can definitely do case 2, option 1. I don't know of other project where they couldn't do that. I just don't know of one, but they still kind of give you that flexibility. All right, and then prerequisite and credit. So at case 2, Energy Star rating, again, projects not eligible. Options for you benchmarks against other similar data. So they kind of give you different ways to kind of make sure you're benchmarking against similar ones. Again, I don't really know of a product where you have to use historical data. But I guess what they could do is say, okay, if you have a bunch of warehouses in your particular area, you can benchmark against them, but I'm not really sure how you would get their data or agree to get your data. So again, but they still kind of give you that option just in case you need it. So again, you're entering performance data, which is your billing data for every electrical meter you have, all your gas meters, and in any other kind of fuel that you have. And then you upload it, you get your benchmark data, you confirm it's met. So again, they had a score of 89, so they clearly met the prerequisite. And then they compared it to get their points. So again, an update benchmarking data routinely. So as you could see there, the food bank is updating their energy data. 8/31 is the last time they did it, which is still pretty recent. So they probably do it quarterly. So you got to, because if you don't do it, then your score goes down just because they just don't have current data. All right, another prerequisite, building level energy metering. Again, you have to have an energy meter. So most buildings do, so that's not hard to meet. And again, install or utilize whole. And so again, and sub-metering, again, that's if you sub-meter some systems, you actually get some points there too. All right, and sub-meter, all energy uses have at least 20% total energy use, and then again, you get points for those credits involving that. Any questions so far for what we're doing here? I know it's just it's an incredible amount of information. What I'm hoping that you're able to do is, if you have two screens, is kind of have that LEED credit library kind of there, and kind of looking through there, comparing kind of what you see there, and maybe kind of opening up the calculators. If you plan on taking the exam, I highly recommend kind of looking at the calculators and just going around your home, or just kind of just basically, LEED certifying yourself, and kind of saying, okay, what kind of fixtures do I have, and fill in the calculator. Okay, well, what are my purchasing habits, and filling in that, to really kind of, and by doing that, you really kind of understand what they're looking for. And so it's exactly the same thing you would do in another project. It's just obviously at a much smaller scale. So when you go and take those tests, you kind of understand, kind of like, oh yeah, I was finding how much money I spent on recycled content paper, that kind of thing. So I'm going to show you these calculators. So by really kind of filling those out, you really kind of, instead of just being kind of like a stat or a fact, you're actually kind of processing that information and using it. So I really recommend that as a study tactic, is kind of go in there and kind of messing around with those calculators, and because whenever we make mistakes and kind of figure things, you figure things out, like, why is this not working, what am I doing, and then you find out. So highly recommend that. Okay, so we'll go ahead and get started. Again, if you have any questions, please put in the chat. You can unmute yourself. So we're still with the prerequisites. Again, there's so many prerequisites and credits themselves. So again, building level and energy metering, got to have it. So here we go. Talked about that. Okay, advanced energy metering again. So what we're doing there is we're sub-metering kind of different systems. All right. So again, consider what what system do you want to look at, because usually these sub-meters are attached to a building operating system, a BAS, or some sort of automation system like lighting. You usually have lighting controls and so forth that you can do that. So you definitely want to sub-meter either your HVAC, your lighting, your process systems, and so forth. And then fundamental refrigerant management. Again, they are really concerned about, ozone depleting refrigerants, which we, usually most likely they've been phased out of your building. But if for some reason they haven't, they just really want to make sure that if you need to identify what refrigerants you do use, and if you happen to be using a CFC, that you have a plan to replace it. And then there's also a credit associated with this, where if you're using basically low impact refrigerants, and they define what those are, then you get some points with that. All right, so replace or retrofit existing equipment that use CFCs. Again, it's really unlikely, but ultimately you have to upload what kind of refrigerant you use to meet this. Either you use no refrigerants or low impact, and then the credit itself is you're using no refrigerants, all right, or low impact refrigerants. And again, they identify what those are on a chart. Believe it or not, CO2 is one of those. So again, and if you're not using CFCs, that's good. Or you calculate your impact with the refrigerant you currently are using. Again, there's a couple things about refrigerants that one is that, obviously with the Montreal Protocol, we were there noticing that these CFCs were destroying the ozone layer. And so the Montreal Protocol phased these out and replaced them with HCFCs and HFCs that have very, very low ozone depleting potential. Unfortunately, what they found is that a lot of times these things that replace them have this thing called global warming potential, so that they're really strong greenhouse gases, unfortunately. So they really we're trying to go to where you're using natural refrigerants like carbon dioxide and ammonia, which they have low global warming, ozone depleting potential, and low global warming potential. So there's actually, there are systems that just purely use carbon dioxide as their refrigerant. So that's kind of where we're going with that. Existing building commissioning. So again, what happens is that when the building gets built, you have brand new systems. And over time, kind of consider this as a basic type of a building tune-up. So the first thing you have to do is kind of evaluate how the systems are doing. So you have third-party vendor, experts go in there and do a kind of what we call an ASHRAE level 2 analysis, or you can do a commissioning agent and so forth, go in there and to see how the systems are doing. And if you do that, You don't necessarily have to do the recommendations, but you just have to go and actually do an audit or do a commissioning analysis, and you get 2 points for that. So again, this is the existing building commissioning. Again, that's you need to have a commissioning agent go out there, and what they do, that they look at all systems and kind of see where they're at, what their set points are, kind of what their conditions are, and then they make recommendations. And then the energy audit is an ASHRAE level 2 audit, which is basically kind of above and beyond the ASHRAE level 1 that you already did. And they come with similar information. They review all your plans, and so they first have to kind of look at your plans, look at existing kind of practices and so forth, and then develop kind of how they're going to basically look at the systems and what systems they're going to look at, and then go ahead and execute it. So this is kind of what we're talking about here. Again, an energy audit. Again, this is an ASHRAE level 2. So they go and look at all the different systems, and they talk about kind of like what are potential energy saving elements and things you can do. And then they kind of present that to you, and you can choose to do them or not. All right, and this is where the next credit you can get is existing building commissioning. So you all right, do you have to review retrofit plans as well? So generally building retrofits they probably are considering retrofitting the mechanical systems, which is what we're talking about. So you could definitely integrate this process into that. So if you're planning on basically upgrading your HVAC systems, or upgrading your exhaust systems, or upgrading controls or what have you, that would probably, if you did that analysis beforehand, that would probably help you meet the credits of this one. So yeah, good question. So again, that's part of this commissioning process implementation. So either you did a commissioning process, or you did a kind of more in-depth energy audit. And what they want you to do there is, that once you do that, you might as well go and implement some of these, and some of these measures they're talking about, energy efficiency measures, EEMs they call them. And so they want you to implement all the low or no cost improvements. So if they're saying, okay, they define what a no or low cost one is. And I think that also a lot of times there's some, I think in this particular case, they kind of say it's up to the program team to define what no or low cost improvements are. So no cost is obvious, but low cost may be, hey, $1,000 or less. So you have to define, the program team defines what that is. And once they define that, then they have to implement those plans. Now the big 5-year plan for upgrades, so we're talking about, those are more capital in nature. They're talking about, hey, we can install on-site renewables, basically hot water, solar hot water plans, or basically replace our chillers, that sort of thing. So that's kind of what's in that implementation plan, so that you get another point for that. And then you also kind of, that's what we all talk about, you also have to train staff. So if you go and make changes, anytime you make a change to a system, so say if you do the commissioning, or you do the audit, and you go ahead and you switch out your lighting, or you switch out your chillers, or you switch out something, a major piece of equipment, you have to confirm that the staff knows about it and has been trained on how to maintain it. And you track it, and then you update your O&M plan. So anytime you make a change, you have to update your operation and maintenance plan as well. So again, the performance of the establishment is that you've met the requirements of the previous credit, which is the analysis, and you implement those improvements, the low cost, no cost. You confirm you have staff training, so you have that piece of documentation you have to do. All right, develop a tracking plan, and then you update your operations plan. So these are the establishment performance of that credit. And again, we talked about that, how are we going to implement those? We need to implement them, and then create a 5-year plan for more capital measures. And then provide building staff training. Again, if you install a system and don't tell anybody about it, or you don't tell them how to maintain it, that's probably not going to do you any good, just because that, like anything, if you don't maintain a car, you don't maintain your home, things are going to break down sooner rather than later. And then ongoing commissioning, again, the previous credits for a one-time thing, but if you actually go all the way, you actually say, okay, we're going to be doing continuous commissioning. All right. And so you establish a process of how you do that, and you get 3 additional points. So again, if you go through this whole process, these points really start to add up. All right, so again, you have to have done all the previous credits. So you're done the analysis, you've done the implementation, and now you're going through the ongoing commissioning. Again, you're talking, you're updating your system manual, you're doing quarterly reports, you're doing quarterly commissioning, and you're updating your CFR plan. So again, this is ideal. It's costly, or at least staff time anyway. But what it does, it really provides you with the most efficient systems because they're constantly being looked at, they're constantly being upgraded and updated and basically reset. So that's really important. And then you modify the existing commissioning plan. So again, CX, when you see that, that's a commissioning. That's shorthand for commissioning. All right. Assign roles, update testing process. So again, these are all steps. Again, don't memorize these necessarily, but it's essentially what they would follow. Okay, and you're determining your schedule for performing ongoing commissioning. So again, it's something you have to say, okay, we're going to do this every quarter, the first month of every quarter, and so forth. Again, review existing BAS or some of this. So a lot of times when you commission, they're looking at this building automation data to kind of see how the systems are running. And we're talking about set points. We're talking about kind of like, temperature of your processed water, all that kind of stuff. So everything I'm saying may not make a lot of sense, but ultimately there's a lot of things, data points you're looking for, and you're identifying any errors, any deficiencies. And again, you're doing that instead of doing that, once every time you certify, you're doing this 4 times a year, which is really kind of important to maintain your systems. All right, and then demand response. Anybody know what demand response is?
It's about lowering electricity use in times of peak demand.
That's right. Yeah. So a lot of times your utility basically tries to encourage large buildings usually that use lots of demand, lots of electricity, to kind of enroll in this program so that when the grid is stressed, they can automatically kind of reduce the load that you're putting onto you'll hear this word load, and load is kind of think of it as all the electricity you need at that moment. So if you have all your AC turned on, all your monitors turned on, all your copiers, everything's turned on, you have a high load, and the only way to reduce that load is to turn off things or lower set points. So it's voluntary. What happens is that the utility gets a way of basically kind of de-stressing the grid, and the participating businesses get a slightly better electricity rate for doing that. The flip side is usually if it does not necessarily always have to be voluntary. So they go say, hey, everyone who's part of this demand response, please go ahead and initiate your demand response plan. And whatever that is, whether it's basically increasing your set points for cooling, what have you, because usually it's usually during summertime, or you're turning off your lights or what have you to reduce your load. If you don't do that, then they basically they ding you on a fine for not doing it. But it's usually it's automatic, and for the case of LEED, they really want you to be automatic. So again, you get 3 points if you basically meet all the requirements in case 2. If it's demand response is not available, do you have a plan? So, because a lot of times when the grid's about to fail, they'll kind of tell everyone, hey, voluntarily, please just turn off your AC, turn off your lights, stop cooking, what have you. Then if you have a plan, then you get a point for that. Or permanent load shifting. And so what load shifting is that a lot of times, if you don't have to turn on that really kind of heavy load equipment, so say you're a manufacturer and your manufacturer equipment just take a lot of energy, if you can somehow shift when you turn and use those energy, those systems when it's not peak day. So like, if you're basically turning those on, kind of early in the morning, or when it's not peak demand, that's a load shifting kind of strategy. So that's what they're talking about there. All right. So again, this is what they're saying is the building needs 8 megawatts of power, 80 megawatts of power. That's a lot. All right. The grid only has 70 megawatts. They're like, okay, can you please reduce 10? Okay. That's a very, very basic kind of cartoonish drawing, but ultimately that's what they're asking. So there's many, many different buildings that participate in this. So ultimately but if they all work together, you can really reduce that demand so the grid doesn't fail. So essentially what ideally is that there's the manual one is that the utility says help, right? And then you have someone responsible in that building that talks to 3 other people three other, this is very cartoonish, but talking to other people in the building to reduce their loads, and it's all manually and voluntary. This is the least ideal, and you actually can't get credit for this. Semi-automated, I think it's that this is kind of like the baseline that they want you to meet, is that the ISO utility says help. You have one person who gets that message, and then using their building automated systems lowers this, the set piece, all the different loads they've identified. Or fully automated, which is the most helpful, is that the utility talks directly to your building automation system that automatically reduces the load from there. So there's no human element to it. It just happens like that. And this is the most ideal way of doing it. All right. And then permanent load shifting, maintain or install systems capable of shifting load to off-peak or continuous basis. So again, you're choosing to operate your machinery when the grid is traditionally not that overloaded. So that's good. And then renewable energy or carbon offsets. Again, essentially, if you're able to, create energy on site for the building to use through renewable ways, that's more ideal than, because ultimately, depending on where you are, sometimes the grids are pretty dirty. So if you have a lot of gas-fired plants or coal-fired plants, the energy your building is using is basically causing a lot of emissions because to make that electricity. And so if you have renewable energy on site, you're reducing that quite a bit. And you can get up to 5 points on this one, depending on how much renewable energy you're generating on site. Or if you're not able to basically, if you just don't have this, your site just isn't compatible with basically producing on site, you can choose to purchase carbon offsets or RECs for the equivalent amount. All right, so say Julie, I think I'm sorry if I didn't pronounce your name correctly, but great having you. Thanks so much. All right. Okay, so what is eligible for renewable on-site energy? All right, so the most common one is photovoltaic. That's your solar panels on the roof or your solar canopies. Solar thermal, that's generally for domestic hot water heating. So they look a lot like solar panels, but they just run the water through the pipes that go in those things. So the sun is preheating that water. Wind, generally don't see a lot of wind turbines on site, but it does happen. Low impact hydroelectric electricity, wave and tidal energy, again, so geothermal and biofuel. So if you somehow can put these on your site, they do qualify as renewable energy creation. All right, so how do you calculate it? Again, it's pretty basic. You kind of say the percent renewable energy generated divided by 1.5. And again, this is all in there, and there is a calculator, but ultimately, and then percentage purchase and offset. So you can do a combination of both, to be honest. So if you're only generating 1%, but you got offset for the remaining, then you can do that. If you do need to do carbon offsets, they need to be green E from certified. So again, that's probably going to be a question on the exam. All right, so there needs to be, because you can't just basically choose anybody. You have to have one that's reputable, and then actually, actually has the positive impacts that we're hoping to have. And then you have to, if you do that, you have to use, buy it for at least 2 years. So it's a lot, some people, like, if you could see them say, okay, like I need to offset all this stuff. So I'm going to buy it for the performance period, which is 3 months, which is not enough. They want you to basically have some staying power and have some impact beyond the certification. So you have to commit to a minimum of 2 years in contract to offset your energy use. All right, so again, that's the last of the energy and atmosphere. The next one we're going to talk about is minimum indoor air quality. And again, energy efficiency and indoor air quality do have some synergies, sometimes positive, sometimes negative. For instance, indoor air quality, if you're able to use outdoor ventilation, so basically using this natural ventilation for cooling and heating, usually it's for cooling, you don't have to use mechanical systems, you're saving energy. On the flip side, a lot of times, to get good indoor air quality, you have to have lots of filtration. So the filters you see in the HVAC systems, whether it's in your home. And so the more stringent the filtration, the more energy it takes to push the air through that filter. So you can have, if you use what we call it's called MERV, it's an acronym. But if you basically kind of have high, really kind of strong filters, it takes more energy to push air through them. So you actually it's a balance between energy efficiency and air quality, unfortunately. So you may hear about that as well. All right. So we're done with the energy efficiency stuff. So any questions about that? we're doing pretty good. We may actually get done before 5. All right, so on to minimum indoor air quality. So actually, no, we're going to material and resources. Sorry, jumped the gun there. Okay, so material and resources. So the two things about materials is, one is that what do we do with our waste? And then the materials that we basically consume, the materials that go into renovations, what's the carbon associated with those? What's the embodied carbon? You may have heard of that. So basically, when you purchase a widget, you purchase paper, what have you, there's some carbon associated with getting that paper to you through extraction of materials, manufacturing, transportation. So by the time it gets to you, there's some carbon that's been emitted to get that paper to you, or get that stapler to you, whatever that is. And so the things you can do to kind of recognize, so if you use lots and lots of paper, maybe you use some that are 100% recycled content. So you're minimizing the carbon, or the, cutting down a tree or what have you to get those. And then on the other side is that for the waste we do have, can we recycle it? Can we repurpose it? Can we, compost it? So that we're minimizing the amount of waste that building generates that goes to landfills. That's kind of the lens in this category. And there's many different credits to kind of help you look at that. So a question about, so how do we know we're choosing the most environmental friendly materials? Anybody want to kind of, if you're kind of, that's something you try to do on your own or for your organization, what are some things we could do to ensure that we're using the least impactful materials? EDPs, or environmental product declarations, absolutely. All right, so again, a lot of things we use for building materials and so forth have these, basically they've done the research and show how much that material had their impacts on the environment. Good. Anything else? All right, so understanding the kind of end of life. So what happens when it needs to be disposed of? Goes to landfill. Can it be composted? Can it be recycled? Again, making choices of, of materials, especially, if it's construction materials and have you, can this material at end of life be repurposed or reused or recycled? Yeah. All right, and making that. So life cycle analysis. Yep, absolutely. LCAs. So you'll hear that acronym quite a bit. Life cycle analysis. So yeah, and just making choices of kind of like how they're made and what can happen when you're done with them. Yeah, can you repurpose it? Absolutely. Excellent. All right, so here is the you have prerequisites for it. All right, again, this is, what is your purchasing policy and your waste policy? Do you have a purchasing policy saying we will purchase 50% or greater recycled content for all paper and paper products? Do we have a recycling policy? Do we have a waste policy? Again, if you're going and you're starting a project and you have no idea how to create one of those, again, go to the LEED credit library and look at those templates they give you, is that they have everything that's required, and then make it your own. So again, you don't have to start from scratch. Same thing with the facilities maintenance and renovation policy. Again, it's a lot about, it's kind of, what are you going to do with the waste? What kind of products you're going to use and what are you going to base it on? Ongoing purchasing, again, are based on, usually it's cost. You look at your most your greatest amount of consumables. So usually it's paper and office supplies and so forth. So you look at all the stuff you spend money on and kind of consumables, and then try to see if you can, based on cost, whether you meet certain, like the amount that the products you use actually have recycled content. I'll show you that in a calculator that we have. And the same kind of thing with lamps. Again, although with lamps, it's about kind of it's about the mercury content. So again, back in 2016, there was a lot of fluorescent lamps, and so they were a lot more efficient than the incandescent equivalents. But there's a lot of gnarly stuff in CFLs, including mercury. So they really were trying to get people to kind of transition to low mercury lamps, and LEDs obviously is a great alternative. And again, you're purchasing, are you, whatever you said you were going to do in the policy, are you actually doing it and can prove it? Again, you get points there. And solid waste management, again, this is more like a waste audit. And then facility management renovation, again, what are you doing with the waste when you do that renovation? So we're going to go into that. All right, so ongoing waste and purchase policy again. This, again, this affects kind of, if you want to go for these credits, your policy will determine kind of how you meet them. All right, because it talks about, basically what are we doing with solid waste? What are we doing about when we purchase lamps? What are we doing when we, purchase, other products as well? So you develop a purchasing policy. Again, you look at all the major, you go and assess kind of all the different things that you do purchase for, and kind of what you currently do. And then you basically say, okay, we will use, we will only purchase, at minimum 50% recycled content paper products, LED lamps only. You have to establish storage areas for the recyclables, create a solid waste policy. Again, if you're not sure exactly what that is defined in the reference manual and also in that policy. So again, when you're studying, download that template, and everything you need to know about it is in that template. So it's just impossible to put it on the slide deck. So I really recommend you kind of download all those free resources and kind of look at them, because that's kind of all the expectations is in that policy. And then you maintain a solid waste program, which is kind of having a recycling program. So you've got your blue bins, your waste bins, and hopefully your compost bins as well. Especially now that's required here, at least in San Diego, it's required. You have to be able to separate all three of those waste streams. So we call it an EPP policy, again, environmental policy, purchasing policy. Identify the most ongoing consumables. The top 5 essentially is what they ask for. You can do more, obviously. Sort purchases in the product categories, paper, all right, drinks, what have you, whatever the categories are. And then classify as ongoing consumable or durable goods. Again, so durable goods are like chairs, computers, things that are, they're just not consumable essentially. All right, determine the 5 purchasing categories by cost. All right, construct your policy, and then to specify process that includes tracking system. So how do you know if you say we're only using 50% recycled content for all our paper products? How can you prove that you're doing it? So is someone monitoring all the purchases that go through? So if you have like an office in the depot, if that's where you get your stuff, someone going and looking at all the purchasing, because you can go and look at what you've done, and tracking that indeed that you are purchasing what you specify. All right, so some common recycling consumables are paper, toner cartridges, binders, batteries. You get the idea. All right, food. All right, so these are some common things that would be the categories. Durable goods, okay, office equipment. So we're talking chairs, desks, appliances, fridges, computers, copiers, audiovisual equipment, electric powered equipment. All those things are all durable goods. Solid waste management policy. Again, you want to ensure that you have a storage area for recyclables that are in the actual place, whether it's depending on the size, you may have a storage room for it. Establish a process for proper diversion. Again, do you have kind of a culture in place where you actually have a recycling bin, you have a compost bin, you have a regular waste bin that for everybody, everyone knows how to use it. There's communication about it. And then develop a policy on how you're going to manage all that waste. All right, and again, there is a kind of a Venn diagram. Again, if you're choosing good purchasing policies, your solid waste management gets a lot easier. So if you're basically buying products that can be recycled or repurposed or composted, it's gonna make it a lot easier for you to have that good diversion rate. But if you're basically buying lots of stuff that can't be repurposed or composted or recycled, you're going to have a lot of waste versus a lot of recyclable. So again, there's some synergies there, and you're looking for that sweet spot where the 2 circles in the Venn diagram actually meet. All right, and then the facility maintenance and renovations policy. Again, when you go and do a maintenance or renovation, major renovation, are there policies in places for purchasing and for waste? All right, again, what do you have to identify what that involves? How are you going to maintain indoor air quality? How are you going to basically manage furniture? Are you going to basically kind of buy furniture? Or are you going to go ahead and look for used ones? All right, what are you going to do with the furniture that you're getting rid of? All right, and specifications for future renovations. All right, so the establishment is you create the policy. Again, there is a policy in the LEED credit library for this credit that you can look at and kind of see what they put in there. You're establishing a waste management policy and indoor air quality policy. So all these things are established. You have to do it. All right, you have to identify who's responsible for it, because it's no good if basically we don't know who's responsible for basically implementing these policies. Include, updates at meetings. Again, you want to talk to people, like, you have staff meetings. Hey, I hope everyone knows we have this, this new composting, part of our, our waste diversion process, because if people don't know about it, they won't use it. All right, and track effectiveness, again, kind of like auditing your waste diversion. All right, so for purchasing, in order for you to kind of get the credit, you have to basically, this is again, the performance period is usually 3 months, and you're looking at 60% of the thing what you purchased, and this is by cost, meet the criteria. And again, I'm going to show you the purchasing calculator. It's really hard to meet this unless you're very, very kind of like, pedantic about it. And then electric powered equipment, if 40% meets, EPEAT or Energy Star performance, then you get the credit for it as well. So here is the purchasing calculator. Right. It keeps on making me have to do this. All right, again, this is looking familiar. This is basically a fancy Excel sheet. Let me go ahead and increase the size of it. Again, there's instructions. It kind of talks about kind of how you do it. And there's different tabs for what's going on. So ongoing waste, lamps, facility maintenance, summary. All right. So we try to do this. So we basically, you have to, the reason why it's so important or so difficult is that you identify all the purchases you made of consumables. And then you go, okay, what percent consumer content is it? So here, this was index binders. These are guide files, and then they had either 10% or 20%. And so the total cost here was $35. So 10% you get, that's $3. And so you add all these up, and hopefully you get to 60%. And again, you see this is a lot. And what we found was in the summary tab, let me go ahead and increase the size here, that we only met 20%. So 20% of our by cost of the purchases met our sustainability criteria that's in the calculator. So the good thing about it is that this is a good way to analyze kind of how you're doing. We did not meet it. It was a lot of work. So a lot of times people just choose not to go and do this, but I think it's going to be more important as we go on for embodied carbon and scope 3 emissions and all that good stuff that people talk about. So again, this is the calculator. What I would do if you just kind of want to check this out is kind of just go and do this for your own purposes, or maybe your own department, and really kind of understand what they're looking at. So again, it's a good way. It's a great way to study, to be honest. Right, here we go. All right, so the criteria they had for paper, usually it's post-consumer or anything that has can have recycled content, extended use, sustainable agriculture, local sourcing for food and beverages, bio-based, FSC certified for wood products and paper. So sometimes you can double count, you can double dip on it, as we call it. So if your paper was FSC certified and had 100% recycled content, you would actually have like over 100% of the cost would be go towards the total sum. So that's kind of cool about that. All right, electric powered equipment, again, that's the 40% by cost. So again, if you're buying all Energy Star rating and EPEAT rated products, if the total exceeds 40%, you get a point. Now, again, most computer monitors are Energy Star rated. So what you do is you just go and find out what you purchased in the last, I think the performance period is 3 months again. So if you happen to buy that, and you just make sure that you just go and put the model number in Google, and it'll tell you whether it's Energy Star. So whether it's a printer, a fridge, a monitor, a computer, what have you, anything that has electrical cord to it or needs electricity, you want it to be these. And again, it's by cost. So that's usually a question on the exams. Kind of it's not by volume, it's by cost. And the same with ongoing consumables. Again, you want it to be greater than 60% by cost, the total there. Again, you're doing the same kind of calculation. All right, and then purchasing for lamps, again, what they're talking about here, it's about calculate mercury content, all right, and identify alternative lamps if needed. Again, you're looking at, do you have, CFLs, that was mainly the target they were looking at, or linear fluorescence, so those long tubes you have, those T8s, can you replace those with low mercury content lamps, which are generally going to be LEDs? So you first have to do an inventory of all the lamps, and then you have to kind of see, okay, find the mercury content of those lamps, and then identify alternatives. And then, basically so that there's average picograms of mercury per lumen hour. You can calculate that using the calculator. And then if you meet that, then you get points. So, all right, in return, it's part of your purchasing plan. All right, purchasing and facility maintenance and renovation. Again, you're looking at, there's a couple ways to do it. You can look at, say, what are the product materials? Are we going to, do environmentally friendly ones, also furniture, or you didn't do any alterations or furniture purchasing during the performance period, which I think is a year. I'm gonna have to double check on that. But ultimately, the best thing is that if you're not buying new stuff, or you're basically kind of getting reused stuff. So a lot of people, if you're getting filling out a new office, if you can get donated furniture or basically used furniture, that's the ideal. Or you just when you do you don't do any alterations and you don't do any furniture purchasing. That's the best. So the criteria is recycled content. You're seeing a pattern here. Wood products, bio-based materials, reuse is a really big one. Extended producer responsibility, green screen, benchmarking, and cradle to cradle certified. So that's a big one as well. So again, this is kind of this life cycle analysis, but basically cradle to cradle is that if whatever parts make the widget you can break it when the widget's done. You can break apart all those widgets, all the parts in that widget, and use all those parts to create something else or a new widget. So that basically there's absolutely no waste. All right, again, low emissions, VOC content requirements for, low emissions for formaldehyde. Again, there's lots of different criterion. All right, so again, most products weighed at 100% of cost. Again, we're talking about cost. All right, so example, 50% FSC certified. Again, this is, you're going to use the calculator. You have to go and use, essentially the EPDs is a good way of finding this information. If not, you're getting the spec sheets for it. All right, yeah. All right. And then you get bonuses for if they're sourced within 100 miles. And so the value of having, basically locally sourced materials is that you're not basically having a huge transportation quotient for, a lot of times the emissions, especially scope 3 emissions or embodied carbon, is that there's a huge carbon component, emission component for transporting materials and products around the globe for this kind of thing. All right, again, you got to go and know how you're purchasing in the first place, develop strategies to meet them. You got to track your data. Again, if you're not tracking what you're doing, you won't know. All right, determine what your current compliance is. All right, and retain manufacturer documentation. So all the purchasing stuff, you have to have spec sheets for it. That you have to upload the PDFs for everything that you do. So that's why the purchasing stuff is so difficult. Is that if you purchase 70 different things, you might have to upload you don't have to upload everyone, but you're the ones you use most. So, but still, it's a lot of research, but worth it. All right, ongoing waste management. Again, this is kind of our diversion from the landfill. Usually this is found through waste audits. Is the best way to do it. Again, you want to 50% of waste diverted is and 75 durable goods. Again, that's pretty good, pretty easy to meet now, especially in California, where you are, at least here in San Diego, you have to divert your organic waste. So it's easy to get to that 50%. You just have to prove it. And then 75% of your durable goods diverted, and so diverted meaning that if you donate them, you repurpose them, and so forth. So again, you're implementing your solid waste policy that was the prerequisite. You have safe collection. So again, you're seeing a pattern you're establishing is that you have a policy, and then you're following it and you're collecting the data. Use consistent metrics. Again, you can, for waste diversion, it's either by volume or by weight. We usually use, I mean, most common way is used by weight. And again, ensure waste haulers provide correct information and determine percentage waste diverted. So there's a couple ways to do this. One is by a waste audit. So what a waste audit is usually you, if your trash is collected once a week, let's just use that for an example. You collect all the trash right before it gets picked up. And usually, I mean, in order to meet this, you have to have basically a recycling policy and have recycling and composting and so forth. And you go and measure how much weight of the waste stream is. So that's your stuff you can't recycle or compost. And then you basically take the weight of all the things you're recycling, and then you take the weight of all the things you're composting, if you're composting, and then you basically say, okay, I say 1,000 pounds of waste. If you add the recycling and the composting together and say that's 600, your diversion rate is 60%. Okay. And then you also look for, if you do a waste audit, usually when you do a waste audit, you see things in the waste stream that could be recycled, and you see some things in the recycling stream that are basically can't be recycled, like wish cycling, and they actually should have been in the waste stream. So when you create the report that's required, you go, okay, this is what we found. We list all the weights, and this is all the categories, and here's some opportunities for better waste diversion. But you take the data, from that and to basically meet the requirements. All right, and then also source reduction as well. Can you use can we, instead of having paper products for the coffee stations at work, can you just basically say, okay, everyone bring your mugs or have mugs provided? Same with plates and cutlery and so forth. Reduce packaging waste, so buy in bulk. And then communicate these procedures. Again, create a culture in your organization about doing that. So if everyone brought their own coffee cup, or basically had mugs, and everyone just basically chose not to use single-use stuff, that goes a long way to reduce, and that counts as diversion as well. Solid waste management for maintenance facilities and renovations. Again, this is kind of very specific kind of time, but it's very important because you can create a lot of waste when you do remodeling. Again, you get 2 points if you divert 70% of your waste from these activities. You get 2 points. All right. No real synergies, from this and everything else. All right. Any questions from anybody about materials, resources, or anything we've kind of talked about up to this point?
Yeah, that really large book that you showed early on, what was that called again?
So this is the reference manual. So every LEED certification, whether it's O&M or new construction, has a manual. So this is the reference manual. Now, if you're going to buy one, go and get the PDF version of it. It's much more usable friendly. Also, if you have a local library, chances are they have these somewhere in there. So I would go, and if you really want to take out this, it's a lot to look at. But if you have questions about a certain credit, it's definitely a good resource to kind of look at it and kind of get. I know I bought this and it was helpful for my studying, but there are PDF versions of it. So last time I checked, if you want to get studied, because the best way to kind of study is actually get practice tests, and so there's organizations like GBCI they'll bundle up the reference manual, the practice tests, and some other study materials and the exam costs, and they'll bundle all that up. So depending on kind of what your price what price you're comfortable with, sometimes it's not worth it. You can definitely go to the library and kind of get it where it's free. It's even better. But if you just want to have your own and you plan on doing a lot of project management for this, I would at least find a way to have access to that, because you're going to need it constantly.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, so let's get started. So indoor air quality is indoor environmental quality is kind of all encompassing. It's basically, it talks about air quality. It talks about quality, basically kind of lighting, kind of ergonomics, other things that affect human health and kind of well-being inside a building, right? And green cleaning, that sort of thing. So it's all lumped into one. So all these credits kind of have that focus of like how we can basically increase occupant comfort and health inside the building. So it's anywhere from lighting, again, like I said, kind of ergonomics, biophilia, what have you. So what are some ways we can make a building healthier for a place to be in? for occupants? What are some things we can just do, whether it's design wise, kind of just practices wise? What are things we can do to make occupants healthier in a building, or yeah, for human health? Maybe think about what makes you, when you go in a building that you like being in, what are the qualities that building has to make your you and the other occupants of the building feel better within it, both health wise, energy wise, what have you. All right, so air quality, thermal comfort, occupant controls, yep. Indoor air quality, yep. Exactly, because you don't want to be freezing cold or super hot. You don't want it to be stagnant air. You want to natural lighting, absolutely. Again, you try to maximize that, and that's usually by design. Exactly, and then quality of use, all these different things are in there. So awesome. Okay, so that's a lot of these credits actually kind of try to promote all that. So there's 3 prerequisites, and this one by far, the first one, basically IEQ P1 this is prerequisite 1, minimum indoor air quality performance. So usually you have a mechanical contractor go in there and measure how much air, outdoor airflow is going to each space. And a lot of times, HVAC equipment doesn't necessarily actually is required to actually bring in outdoor air. Even though they're built to do that. A lot of times there's like little doors that they can open and close that allow that outdoor air to come in. And sometimes they can be adjusted to, because a lot of times if you live in a really cold place, you don't want to bring in really cold air and try to heat it. It's a lot easier just to heat the air that's already in the building. The problem with that is the air quality goes right down. And same thing on a really hot day. You don't want to bring a really hot day. But in order to meet this, this is, again, I've been on a project where we couldn't certify because we couldn't get this number down. And the requirements to do so was basically beyond the money they were willing to do. So again, you usually have a mechanical contractor, usually your own, usually buildings have a mechanical contractor where they go and actually measure this. And so they measure the outdoor air that's coming into each major space. So that's a hard one. You also have this smoke control, so you can't smoke near buildings or doors and openings. And if you do smoke, it has to be within 25 meters away from any occupied space. And then have a green cleaning policy again. So what kind of products, what kind of equipment you use, and how you do things. Again, this is all prerequisites. Then you have management programs, strategies, thermal comfort, interior lighting. So there's lots of different credit. And day lighting and quality of use is a big one. Green cleaning, again, how effective is your custodial staff? What kind of products you're using? What kind of equipment you're using? What kind of pest control do you have? And then last but not least, but usually you're doing this occupant comfort survey to kind of inform everything else. But so do you do it for a survey? So there's lots of credits in this one. So here we go. So again, this is the one that's really hard to meet, to monitor the outdoor airflow and met ventilation standards. So usually you need about 10 cubic foot per minute per person in every major space. So usually most of this is done by mechanical cooling or heating. Sometimes you have natural ventilation, so there's slightly different ways to calculate that with mechanical. So if you're using natural ventilation, you're most likely going to get that, but it's harder to make sure you're getting those flow rates. And then sometimes you have mixed modes, so there's different ways to calculate it as well. So it's really challenging one to do that, and you usually need a mechanical contractor to do that for you. All right, so your systems are able to meet the outdoor airflow rates. So again, these are based on, again, ASHRAE 62.1. This is all, again, that's ASHRAE standards. So that's going to be control what your what your airflow rates are. And then SEN standards are based for buildings that are outside the United States and Europe. And then case 2, systems that are unable to meet the requirements, complete engineering assessment of the system's maximum outdoor flight. Again, there's work to do that. You have to basically have an engineer to do that. So again, it's just easier to go and find out what what the situation is, and usually kind of go and improve the situation, which is basically opening up those doors and so forth. Those economizers is what we like to call them. And a ventilation zone, again, is, usually most like a package unit will basically kind of cool a certain area of a building. So that's the ventilation zone we're talking about. Or if you have, basically chilled water doing that, then you have the zones that, you're not getting the same airflow rate from each all the rooms. They have that's the ventilation zone. So usually buildings are broken up into these ventilation zones. So you measure the outdoor rate, you compare rates with calculated per reference standard, and you take steps to correct it if needed. So if you're not getting that 10 cubic foot per minute, what can you do to do that? So usually it's opening up the economizers and kind of increasing the flow rates from the actual package units or whatever's bringing in that outdoor air. So usually you have single zone, all right? So outdoor air and recirculated, recirculated air, because a lot of times you're not, getting 100% outdoor air unless you're a hospital or a doctor's office. Usually what you're doing is you're kind of blending some recirculated air because it's easier to cool that. It's already at temp, and outdoor air. Or you do 100% outdoor air. Again, that's harder to heat and cool, especially on extreme heat or extreme cold days. And then multiple zone recirculating. So that's the kind of systems we have. Again, case one, it's all based off 62.1. So just remember that number. 62.1 is for airflow rates. And then this is the European one. All right, so how do you do it? So if you have a ducted system, you use a pitot tube or other device to kind of measure the flow rate. Not accessible temperature and air intermixing. So again, none of this may make any sense to you. Mechanical contractors know exactly what this means. And then if you have multiple air handling units, you have to measure it at each individual, because wherever they bring in the air from the outside, you literally have kind of like an anemometer, I think that's pronouncing it right. So basically it looks like a big propeller. The faster it spins, there's more air, the more air it's coming in, and you multiply that rate times the opening size, whether it's usually it's square inches on that one. All right, so naturally ventilated spaces, again, there's things that you have to do. It's a little more challenging. Again, you don't have to read all this, but essentially, you have to have mechanical backup, and you have to meet the requirements. So the requirements are different than mechanical systems. It's because they just want to make sure that you indeed have ways for that air to flow in. You can't just say we have open windows and there we go. You have to make sure that the design provides a certain flow rate through those windows or through the building. Again, there's minimum ceiling height. It's a challenge, but people who are designing these purposefully know what these are, and you just basically have to upload all the drawings and the different calculations you've made. All right, you have to implement the maintenance HVAC equipment. It's amazing how many people, like these systems are, thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars, and they choose not to maintain them on a regular basis. It just blows my mind. There's a lot of things that can go wrong with them. Your filters for the first place can get super old and clogged, and so the more dust that basically they've trapped, the harder it is to get the air through there. So again, you're wasting energy there. You may have some motor issues. You may have other your outdoor air, the economizer may be broken. So and you can only catch that when you go and maintain it. All right, environmental tobacco smoke control. This is probably one of the easier ones to know. Essentially, you can't smoke inside the building. Clearly, it's almost you can't smoke outside the building unless it's in designated areas. They have to be within 25 meters of any occupied space or open window. You have to have signage basically saying it's not smoking. Again, 25 feet from any outdoor intakes or operable windows, or building entries. So that's the thing on that one. Green cleaning policy, again, either you have an in-house green cleaning policy. So again, if you go to the LEED credit library, you can see a template of kind of that they recommend. And again, all the requirements are in that template. That's the great thing about it. And so you just basically have a policy there, or if you have a certified cleaning service, that their policy matches what the requirements are. So again, your operating procedures, your performance metrics, how are you measuring it, how are you staffing and training people, what kind of products you're using, materials and equipment. Again, all the requirements are in the reference manual, and it has all in there. Again, just instead of reading the reference manual, go ahead and read the template, just because it has everything in there. So it's kind of like a nice little cheat. All right, so what you're trying to do is you're trying to reduce the amount of water you use, the amount of energy you use, and toxic chemical reduction. Again, toxic chemicals and VOCs and so forth. Are we purchasing cleaning products? And there's a lot of ways that, you know, EPA safer, there's a lot of different categories and third-party products that basically meet the requirements. And I'll show you that with the purchasing calculator. You have to prove that you're training staff and that you're choosing equipment equipment that's basically energy efficient and better for the environment. And then the cleaning service has to prove all that. If you have option 2, if you have a cleaning service, they have to prove that they meet all these as well. All right, so again, approved third parties, Green Seal is a big one. International sanitary supply. So again, this is more in the European theater. Local equivalents for projects outside the United States. So again, for the here in the United States, it'd be more about the Green Seal GS-42 requirements. All right, so indoor air quality management program. All right, so again, this is you do an audit of some sort. It's called an I-beam audit. Again, you educate the building. You kind of do an assess of kind of things you could do to make the air quality better. Again, you have to develop your management program and you have to implement it, and then you have to conduct an I-beam audit. So this is this is also an EPA based thing. So that you go online, you download the kind of the requirements and kind of like the checklist that you need to do. And then you walk around with the team, your project team, to kind of go through each space and kind of see does each space meet the requirements, things you have to do to improve that. All right, so again, this is a kind of a checklist. All right, again, is the air quality okay? No odors, no stuffiness. Are occupants kind of talking about, are they positive about it? What are the thermal conditions? Are they super hot, super cold, just right? Is lighting adequate? So again, you go through the whole thing for each space. So that's kind of cool. So this is the checklist you do. And then you establish an IAQ management program. So you review the forms and you do your audit. You conduct the audit of occupied spaces, mechanical systems, and building exterior. And then identify issues and then resolve them. Essentially, that's the whole point of audits, is to basically find out what's going on. Using the kind of what you're looking for, again, which is kind of air quality, thermal comfort, mechanical systems working, and so forth. And then if you identify any things that are basically lacking or kind of below par, you resolve them. All right, and you have to do this every 5 years. So that's good. So if you did an I-beam audit 3 years before you certified, that would be good. So again, there's some audits, if you've done them within a certain amount of time, you don't have to redo them. All right, enhanced indoor air quality strategies. Okay, entryway systems. So that's kind of like mats, walk-off mats, so that you're not tracking in, dust and other allergens and stuff like that into the building. And then there's other IAQ strategies which they'll go through. Here we go. All right, so for the mats, you identify what entrances are mostly used. All right, and identify the permanent entryway systems you want to do. It's mats or some sort of grate. You select and install them, and then you maintain them on a weekly basis. And they have to be a minimum of 10 feet in length. So you probably walked into a building and saw these entry mats or these grates as you walk in. And the whole point is so that whatever's on your shoes kind of gets basically absorbed by these mats. And that's why you have to maintain them, because you want to get rid of all those allergens on the spot. All right, and then some enhanced option 2. You can basically you want to increase basically either outdoor air monitoring, increase filtration, monitor CO2. Again, alarmed opening. So again, if you have a if you have a naturally ventilated space, you want to make sure that you want to know that the spaces are getting opened. So again, these are things you need to do. So strategies to improve IQ. So filtration. So this is those MERV, 1 through, I think the highest one is 18. Carbon dioxide monitoring. The reason why that's important is that have you ever been inside a conference room and there's lots of people in it? After a while, even though you may have the most riveting conference or the presentation, what have you, over time you kind of get sleepy. And that's because once CO2 gets over a certain amount, like certain parts per million in the room, it causes you to get sleepy. So if you're able to basically see that threshold is being met, that basically cues, the HVAC system to kick in and kind of exhaust the air. That's good. Outdoor air monitoring, again, you just want to make sure that it's right temperature and then alarmed openings. So MERV is, again, the higher it is, the better. Again, the problem with that is you want to have MERV filtration that's 13 or greater. So those filters, you can go to Home Depot and you can see the MERV rating on them. The higher that it is, the only unfortunate part is that they literally can filter out almost all allergens and even viruses sometimes, but the amount of energy, it makes the HVAC system work harder because it's harder to push that air through there because it's filtering it that much. So, but if you have MERV 13 filters or higher, you get a point. All right, thermal comfort. All right, so again, this is another ASHRAE one, ASHRAE 55. That's for thermal comfort. Again, if you meet those requirements, and again, ISO and CEN, those are more, those are for European standards, most likely. All right, so again, you want to monitor air temperature, humidity, and data. Again, there's no point in collecting data if you can't log it and look at it. So again, that's what your building management system can do. And then also that you alarm conditions. So if you set your alarms for CO2 levels going up a certain point, humidity levels going beyond thresholds, and same with temperatures, so that when that does happen, someone's being alerted and can do something about it. Because there's no point in monitoring it if you're not actually doing something about it when it goes beyond the thresholds that you're looking for. Exterior lighting, again, do you have lighting control? Interior lighting, do you have lighting control? So again, do occupants have control of the lighting over their desk, in the spaces they're in there? And then option 2, lighting quality. So again, provide lighting controls for individual and micro occupant space or multi-occupant spaces. And again, they define what that is. And then lighting quality, again, are you getting certain lumens per square foot? Are you getting, what kind of light is it? You have to measure all that. So lighting control, do 50% of the individuals have, individuals control? And then for shared spaces, do 100% have that? And then lighting quality, again, this one's hard to get. You have to get 4 out of the, they give you, what is this? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. You have to get 4 out of the 8 there. So you have to have, certain luminance of the light fixture. You have to have a certain color blending index. So that has to be kind of true to natural light. Lamp life, again, direction overhead of the building. So some of these are easy to get, but then all 4 of them are difficult to get. So you have to prove that all the spaces can meet 4 out of 8 of these. So the surface luminance ratio is really hard on your work surface. Though you have to measure the light kind of on the surface, on the walls, on the ceilings, and they have to meet a certain threshold. So it's pretty challenging. All right, and then daylight and quality views. Again, are you getting a lot of natural daylight? And in quality views, kind of they define what those are. So, so again, you have to, for daylighting measurements, it all depends on the time of year. So if you're measuring in the wintertime, you also need to measure in the summertime, because obviously the amount of light and the angle of light into the windows is going to be different. All right, so determine the size of the grid. So again, all this is in the reference manual and how you do it. They literally give you pictures and written descriptions on how you do it. Again, this is pretty challenging though. Perform the measurements with a light meter. Again, to set how many lumens you're getting, and then review results to confirm compliance. So you just have to have a certain amount of daylighting in these grids. And again, if you took your first measurement in February, then you would have to go in June, October. So again, that performance period is a lot longer than, say, your energy, than your kind of purchasing one. So again, and again, this is summer. Obviously, it's gonna be different in winter and fall. Quality views, okay. Again, you need to have, quality views. They say it's either vision, like, multiple lines of sight to either flora, which is plants, fauna, animals, sky, movement, objects at a minimum distance from exterior glazing. Because what you don't want to do is like if you have a window and you're looking at a wall, obviously that wouldn't work. But if you have a window and you're looking at trees, you're looking at people walking by, you're looking at birds, that would meet that. All right. And unobstructed views of located within a distance 3 times the height of the vision. So again, what does that mean? They have a picture of what that means and how you have to basically define it. And you have to show that you meet that when you go and upload your documentation for it. Again, this is kind of challenging on buildings, on the average building, but ultimately, if it's designed that way, it's actually a pretty good way to get points. All right, green cleaning effective custodial effectiveness assessment. So essentially, this is an APA audit that they call it, and essentially, we've done this in our projects where you have a team. You literally go into you know, a certain percentage of certain kind of spaces. So you go, so say you have to look at every kind of space. So bathrooms, offices, storage units, mechanical spaces, what have you. And you know, and you have to go and, you know, so you have to look at like maybe 30% of the bathrooms and, you know, that sort of thing. So you have to kind of identify which spaces you're going to look at. And then you're going to see how well is custodial cleaning it. So you go in there and you actually rate it on a scale of 1 to 5 of each, like of horizontal surfaces, vertical surfaces, the actual fixtures themselves, and kind of assessing how well the custodial is actually working. And then usually you need a score of the lower the number, the better, ultimately. So, you know, so you have to meet a score, I think, about 2 or 2.5. All right. And it's at NAPA, this is, you know, operation guidelines. So this is another third-party association. So that would remember that for green cleaning. So you have to look at every space type, the appearance items, average time weighted factors. So how often it's used needs to be considered. So again, floors, again, this is pretty important. So they really weight that heavily. Horizontal surfaces, lighting fixtures, trash containers, and so forth. And so you can say, okay, what's 1 through 5? So 1 being best, 5 being worst. And so here, like, you know, the floors were, you know, they were pretty darn clean. So they got a good score for that. The things that weren't that good, horizontal surfaces, you know, that kind of had a thing. But ultimately their score was 2.4. So the raw score was, you know, 240. So the divided by 100, your score is 2.4, and that would have passed. So that's kind of good. So roundly select 10% of rooms in each space category to audit. All right. And then identify areas of improvement. So every time you do an audit, there's always a report, and usually that says, you know, and almost always you have to, there's a section for rooms for improvement. So you can say like, hey, we noticed that horizontal surfaces were generally dirtier than vertical surfaces and the fixtures themselves, and we recommend, you know, them working on that. And then you could conduct future audits to make sure those improvements were actually, those recommended improvements were actually done. All right, green cleaning products and materials. Again, this is, you're tracking it. So I'm going to go ahead and show you the calculator that I, here we, where is it? There we go. So I have to, I don't know why it does that, but so here's a green cleaning calculator, and what it's doing, it's saying, okay, by cost, what materials are we using to clean our spaces? Okay. So if you look here, you go and say, okay, here's the products, here's the cost, the number of items, all right, and the total costs. And then you see the category, and then what criterion are there? So if you go to here, for instance, here, this was EPA's CPG, all right, so that's another credit. So usually all these things have there, is it FSC certified, GS1? So there's all these different, is it Loco 175? So again, usually it's EPA CPG certified is what you're going to find on these cleaning services, or FSC certified. So these were all EPA CPG products. And notice by cost, all right, 73. So again, the total cost was there. And so the summary of it was 26% by cost sustainability products. And so you get a certain amount of points for that. So that's how it's calculated. Again, I would, again, if you get a chance, if you want to study, go ahead and just kind of audit yourself at home or audit your department and really kind of see kind of what these things are. And really kind of what we'll do is kind of like cue, when you see questions on this, it'll kind of cue your own experience to kind of like answer the question. So that's usually how they write it. Create a tracking system, again, using this calculator is one of them, and then collect and catalog the information. All right. All right, so purchase green products for at least 75% by cost. So again, we filled out the calculator. We didn't get anywhere close to 75%, so we didn't get any points. Communicate policy to the occupants, tenants, and representatives. Tenants not providing data. Again, a lot of times, if you have multiple tenants in the building, they need to help you with getting this information. So there's ways of dealing with that if they don't. Green cleaning equipment. Again, they have safeguard? Is it ergonomic design? Are they environmentally convertible batteries? So are you using, you know, again, you don't want any gas powered stuff by any means. Again, a lot of the vacuum cleaners, are they CRI, Carpet Rug Institute certified, seal of approval. A lot of times there's third-party equipment vendors like UL, so forth. Again, maximum sound decibels for equipment it's got to be less than 70 decibels. Mufflers on propane or powered for equipment. Again, you know, you definitely don't want that in your building, but would they have mufflers on them? And again, cost per compliant items versus total cost. Again, everything's by cost. Okay, integrated pest management. Again, this is kind of what kind of pest management do you do? A lot of times pest management, you know, they basically kind of throw chemicals out there that they're basically gnarly and try to kill the things. With integrated pest management techniques, usually what it is that you try to first eliminate things that keep pests in the building. So one is pests come in the building because they're looking for food, they're looking for water, or they're looking for shelter. So if you eliminate the food and water that they can go after and eliminate ways for them to go in, that's what the first thing you try to do when you're trying to eliminate pests. And then you try to do some other, you know, other non kind of chemical processes. And if you have to go to using chemicals, that you're using ones that are identified as safe as possible. And so it's just it's a policy, it's a management policy that you use. All right. So do you have an in-house policy so if you have staff that do this, or are you contracting with a third party that uses IPM strategies? And you have to document all this to get the point. Again, you have to identify that monitor the test, action thresholds for all pests likely to be encountered. So again, what do you do when you see, you know, a couple, when you see many, you know, or you have infestation? Again, you want to try non-chemical preventative pest managers. And again, what are you going to do when you reach these thresholds? Again, that's all identified in the reference manual. Okay, how are you going to inspect this? How are you going to prevent it? And it's expensive, you know, how do you communicate this between the IPM team? So you have to identify a team, who's your integrated project management team, and the building occupants. All right, and so you have to have, for each pest, you have to have all these things identified for each pest. All right, and then a contracted service party, they have, instead of you doing in-house policy, they have to have a policy to identify all these things. All right, so California just passed a law banning rodenticides. Awesome. All right, again, so again, if you're G-Pro certified, if you're EcoWise certified or Green Shield, you're basically certifying yourself that you're using IPM standards and so forth. So that's, if you are looking for a third-party service, you want to make sure that they have one of these 3 certifications. All right, and then if you have to use a pesticide, I guess we can't do that anymore, but if you did in version 4, you would have to, there's something, the San Francisco Tier 3 hazard criteria, and you want to make sure that it meets that. And they have a website where you go and they have all the products that you use and say, okay, we use that product. It'll tell you what tier it is. And if it's not the tier that's required, you have to replace it. And then lastly, the occupant comfort survey. This is something that I think that I don't know why they might put it last, but it's also because it informs everything else. And so what you need to do is that you're asking building occupants, are you satisfied with where you're at? And so you're saying, are you happy with the acoustics? All right. And if they're not, and usually it's like you're satisfied, not satisfied, or you're very satisfied, slightly satisfied. So there's a range of things. And if you're neutral, you're okay. So if you're anywhere from satisfied to neutral, you're okay. But if you're dissatisfied or very dissatisfied, then you have to. And if you have a threshold of people that are dissatisfied with acoustics, you have to do something about it. So you're asking every occupant, what do you think about the acoustics, about the cleanliness, indoor air quality, lighting, and thermal comfort? All right. And they literally, it's on a scale from like, are you very satisfied to very dissatisfied? All right. And then all the ones in between. And again, I recommend this, if you do this with all the occupants, that'll inform everything else you're doing for indoor air quality. So I just don't know why they list it last, because I think it's probably the most important thing you can do. All right. So if you have 20% of your occupants are dissatisfied in any measure of that particular thing with acoustics, you have to do something about it. Okay. So if you interviewed 100 people, 20 people said or more said the acoustics are really loud, you have to do something about it. Or the building's really dirty, you have to do something about it. All right. And you have to write a report and you have to talk about what you're going to do and you have to prove you did it. All right. So the performance is you survey, you address issues with 20% or more dissatisfaction. So again, here's the scale, very satisfied, 0 neutral. So anytime they respond neutral to very satisfied, that's not a dissatisfied person. If they go basically from any portion dissatisfied, you have to do something. They're considered dissatisfied and you have to do something about it. And you have to have a minimum of 30% response rate. Develop a corrective action plan. Again, this is part of your reporting. And then implement no-cost measures. All right. And then you have to identify if you have to do some capital measures, you have to identify what those are and understand how you're going to do it. And no real synergies there. Oh, sorry. Well, I guess again, indoor air quality, the synergy is that it can affect your efficiency, energy efficiency, usually in a negative manner, unless you're doing natural ventilation. All right, innovation of operations. Again, this is kind of how you get some extra points or get credit for things you're doing that are not necessarily in the reference manual or in a credit specifically. All right, so one of them is if you have a LEED accredited professional on your project, you get 1 point automatically. All right, and you get there's a maximum of points, and so usually what it is, if you use a pilot I forget the credit you basically get max points on certain credits, you actually get some more points for that. And then also there's regional priority. So again, the way you find that out is you go on to the if you go to the LEED credit library and you see the regional priority link, you click on that and you put in your zip code and it'll say energy and atmosphere is a regional priority. So if you go and you do exceptional on that, you get some more points and so forth. All right, so for innovation, they have some pilot projects, which are pilot credits that you can go and research on the USGBC or the GBCI website and so forth. And then additional strategies that, again, that's regional priority and exemplary performance. So again, if for our projects, since we got basically the max points on energy and water, we got another point for exemplary performance on those. So we got additional points, and that was part of the total 6 that you can get in this category. A LEED credit professional, again, the LEED AP, you just put their certificate number and identify who they are and upload that. And then regional priority, again, usually for Southern California, it's water efficiency, energy efficiency, on-site renewable generation, and I forget what the other one is. There's a couple other ones. So again, you can use a maximum of 4 of these. And so before I go into the wrap up and resources, we've kind of done the actual content of all this that you need to know. And again, we'll talk more about it in the wrap up, is that there's a lot to it. It's going to take some time, unless you're doing O&M project all the time. You probably need to go and study up on the reference manual. And again, use that for LEED credit library resource a lot. Any questions before I go into the wrap up and resources? All right, so Claudia's asking, how long does it take the whole certification process to take between documentation for the credits and awarding the certificate? I mean, to be honest with you, unless everyone's already collected the data and so forth, it varies. I know some projects have gone 2 years. Like for instance, for the food bank, we did a kind of an assessment. We kind of this kind of a feasibility study, we called it. And we basically found that there's a lot of things they had to do in order to basically certify. And so we identified those. It took them a year or so to do those. And then it took another year for us to kind of go and get the data, document it, and submit it. So anywhere from 2 years to a year. I mean, it's unrealistic to think you're going to do it within months. I'm sure there's probably a project that did, but it takes a while. Yeah. So good question. Any other questions? Okay. So here we go, wrap up. So recertification. So basically in LEED version 4, you have to recertify every 5 years to get your certification. So, and then so basically, if you've been, tracking your data, all you do is really upload all that data to kind of verify you're continuing to do that. So there's a bit more to it, but ultimately it's every 5 years to do that. Again, this is the LEED credit library. Absolutely, this huge resource. Go into every credit, go into the resources tab and download any policy, any calculator you have, and just use them and look at them. All right. So next steps is download the LEED candidate handbook. Again, this link will be active in the PDF we send you. I would definitely consider using at the minimum. There's a couple third party, but GBCI is a good one, or other third party. Download like the practice test. So usually there's when I did it, there was a resource I used that had 4 different practice tests, and if you can get 100%, or I'm sorry, above 90%, because I just took them over and over and over and over and over again. So if you can get above 90% on your own, then you're ready to go. So if you can, so on every test you get a 90% or above consistently, you're ready to go. If not, and the good thing about taking the test over and again is every time you don't get a question right, you go and research what the right, why the right, because they tell you what the answers are. You research why that was the correct answer, and you start to learn more and get to see the trends and kind of things they're really kind of honing in on. So and then when you're ready to register, you go on the USGBC website or GBCI website to register for the test. There's 2 options now. You can do an online test where it's online proctoring, or you go and do a Prometric test where you go into and actually take the test for there. It's, you know, depending on what it is, so you just go and do that. And we'll send you some resources as well. So any questions that I can answer? And again, if you have any questions, here's my email right there. Any questions I can answer for you about kind of how to prepare for this test or kind of anything that I mentioned before. You're welcome, Nicole. Thank you. Yeah, it's a ton of stuff. So yeah. Definitely get those practice tests, if you get like a, you know, practice workbook or whatever, a study guide, I would do that. LEED credit library. Sarah, is there anything you want to say before we go?
I was going to share a few more slides, but I think everyone's probably had enough PowerPoint for one day. I would just ask you if you could complete our survey. I'm just putting it in the chat right now. That would be much appreciated. I'll also send it to you in your follow-up email, which I've drafted, and I will hit send when we close this meeting. I would just like to thank you, Robert, for keeping us going and engaged for the last 4 hours. That was a real feat. So thank you, especially on a beautiful Friday afternoon. I do also want to mention that we have a couple other LEED trainings coming up. So do check our website if you would like to attend more LEED, and we'll be also announcing some new LEED training in November as well. So keep checking back. I think that's probably it from me. Again, just thank you to Robert. Thank you to our sponsor, SoCalGas. That's all I got. Last call for questions before we close the meeting.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'll stay on. So if you don't have any questions, you're free to go. And if you have a question, stay on and unmute yourself and ask away.